Nothing says July 4th quite like fireworks.
Every year when the skies of America blaze with fireworks on July 4th, millions of people lift their voices in glorious hymns to celebrate the birth of the Temple of Liberty. And yet, hidden beneath that glorious surface are shadowed corners that perhaps not everyone wants you to see. There are rumors that the America we know today is in truth the result of secret societies and calculations that began a very long time ago. And perhaps the destiny of the greatest empire on earth seems to have been sketched out and decided centuries in advance. Welcome to Banned History, the July 4th curse and the 2026 biblical prophecy of America. Tonight, while the world is fast asleep, we will turn back the pages of history that have been crossed out. We will lift the mysterious veil over the nation's independence and confront the most chilling prophecies now casting their shadow over our age. In this special documentary episode, we will decode 4 enormous mysteries one by one in order to see a completely different truth about the United States of America. Let us begin with the most powerful symbol itself. First, we will open the hidden codes on the dollar bill and examine how the founding generations mapped out the capital city of Washington according to sacred geometry to see whether free America was actually a chessboard arranged in advance by the Freemasons. Next, we will search for the answer behind Independence Day, July 4th. Why did the first 3 presidents of America all breathe their last on this exact day? Was it merely a random coincidence written in the stars? Or the price paid for a founding curse? The third piece will take us into pages of history that were permanently censored, crossed out from the very beginning as we explore what terrifying vision Benjamin Franklin may have seen about the future of the nation, a vision that forced him into silence. And all these traces seem to be converging toward one fated moment. Finally, we will confront the biblical prophecy about America in the year 2026. Will this superpower fulfill the fate of ancient Babylon, collapsing economically in just 1 hour? Or will it sink into a storm of polarization, forcing its people to gather dry branches one by one in order to rebuild the nation from the ashes? Prepare yourself, because what you are about to hear may forever change the way you see the history and the future of the United States of America. The mystery of the occult symbols on the US dollar bill and the secret society of the Founding Fathers. Let us begin with something billions of people touch every day, yet very few truly see the $1 bill. You usually only look at the number at the portrait of President George Washington in order to pay trade or shop. But if you take a magnifying glass and examine that piece of paper under angled light, you will realize that what you are holding is not merely money, but a blueprint of power from some of the most secret societies in the world. That bill passes through the hands of shopkeepers, businessmen, politicians, soldiers, tourists, the rich, the poor, churches, casinos, banks, and old leather wallets across the world. It is small, thin, and so familiar that it has become almost invisible in everyday life. But on the back of the $1 bill, America placed a system of symbols far denser than what would be needed for an ordinary tool of payment. There is an eagle, a shield, 13 stars, 13 arrows, an olive branch, a pyramid, an eye inside a triangle, Latin phrases, and the year 1776 written in Roman numerals. Every detail carries its own meaning. When all of them are placed together, this small bill becomes a doorway into the world of political symbolism, theology, Western occultism, and the secret societies that once influenced the imagination of the founding era. The dollar bill symbol, or cipher. Why does the $1 bill carry the image of a pyramid with its top cut off with a radiant eye floating above it? That is the symbol of the all-seeing eye, a symbol that occult circles believe represents the watchfulness of supreme beings. According to the official explanation of the United States, that eye is called the Eye of Providence. It represents the oversight and protection of God over the founding of the nation. But this symbol does not carry only one interpretation. According to many scholars in European Christian art, the eye inside the triangle once suggested the omniscience of God. In Western occult tradition, that same image is read as the sign of a supreme intelligence observing the world from above human order. The pyramid beneath it makes the symbol even more distinctive. Its shape opens a chain of associations in the mind, leading the viewer back to ancient Egypt, the tombs of the pharaohs, sacred systems of measurement, and the Western obsession with civilizations that once built enormous structures in an attempt to touch immortality. However, in the Great Seal of the United States, the pyramid has 13 steps representing the first 13 colonies. The unfinished top shows a nation still being built, not yet complete, still needing time to reach its final form. The combination of an unfinished structure and the eye floating above it creates a mysterious feeling. The American government presents itself as a project moving forward, and above that project stands the gaze of providence. From a political angle, this is a statement about the birth of a new nation after the revolution. From a more mystical angle, it becomes the image of a structure of power being watched by an intelligence beyond the sight of the people. The Latin phrase running around it reads, "Annuit coeptis," meaning he has favored what we have begun. And below it is Novus Ordo Seclorum, a new order of the ages. A more precise translation of Novus Ordo Seclorum is a new order of the ages. In the context of the year 1782, this phrase referred to a new political era, beginning with the Declaration of Independence in 1776. But Latin language has a special power. It makes a political message feel ancient, ceremonial, and almost sacred. When ordinary people see this phrase on the bill, they rarely know its original meaning. That very distance creates fertile ground for mysterious interpretations. If America declared a new order, then who designed that order? The system of symbols does not stop with a slogan about a new age. It continues to be reinforced by words with a more sacred tone. Annuit coeptis works in a similar way. This phrase places the entire founding project under the approval of God. But for those who believe in conspiracy theories and secret societies, it also suggests that the Founding Fathers saw the revolution as a grand project with symbolic meaning. They were building a new structure for power law and the place of human beings in history. Why would the Founding Fathers of a democratic nation, built on the foundation of individual liberty, use the theocratic symbols of ancient Egypt and the mystical systems of the West and place them on the national currency? The answer lies in the roots of the men who signed the Declaration of Independence. The 18th century was the Age of Enlightenment. But the Enlightenment of that period was not completely separated from ancient symbols, mystical philosophy, secret societies, rituals, and ideas about cosmic order. The American founders lived in a world where Newton, the Bible, natural law, Greco-Roman philosophy, classical architecture, and fraternal rituals could all coexist in the mind of an educated person. To them, building a nation was not only a matter of writing laws. It also meant creating a system of symbols powerful enough for a new community to believe that it carried a historical mission. For that reason, the $1 bill became a place where politics and public theology converged. George Washington on the front represents the face of the Republic. The back leads the viewer into a deeper space where America presents itself as a structure being raised through order, measurement, symbolism, and the approval of providence. Freemasonry and the sacred geometry of Washington, D.C. To understand more clearly how power is expressed through space, we need to look at the design of the American Capitol itself, the design of Washington, D.C., and sacred geometry. The diamond-shaped layout, the boundary map of the Capitol, was designed in the shape of a diamond, a rhombus covering exactly 10 square miles. Under the order of President Washington, 40 stone boundary markers were carefully placed by a group of local Freemasons through a complex ceremony. Many opinions suggest that the diamond shape surrounding the city was the way Freemasonry embedded the symbol of the square and compass into the geographic structure of the Capitol. More precisely, the original federal district was envisioned as a square 10 miles on each side, meaning 100 square miles. When placed diagonally on the map, it appeared like a giant diamond between Maryland and Virginia. The surveying team, led by Andrew Ellicott, with the prominent participation of the astronomer and mathematician Benjamin Banneker, established the boundary lines through astronomical observation measurement and 40 stone markers placed at 1-mile intervals. From an administrative perspective, this was the survey work for a new capital. But in the imagination of those who study symbolism, placing a city of power inside a complete diamond shape carries a meaning far greater than that. Geometry here is not only used to measure land. It creates the feeling that the Capitol was raised inside a sacred frame, a zone separated from the ordinary states to become the political center of a new nation. The cornerstone ceremony also gives the story a Masonic mark. In the year 1793, George Washington took part in the cornerstone laying ceremony for the Capitol in Masonic form, with members of the fraternity present in formal dress and solemn ritual. To most of the public, it was only the groundbreaking ceremony for a government building. To those who understand Masonic language, the cornerstone symbolizes the foundation of the structure uprightness order and the transformation of raw land into architecture with purpose. A complex geometric network. Geometry and the meanings behind numbers are part of the sacred geometry used by architects of that time. L'Enfant designed the diagonal avenues first, then developed the grid of city streets from those main axes. When viewed from above, these intersections create sacred geometric shapes such as triangles, rectangles, and circles. Pierre-Charles L'Enfant was a Frenchman who had served in the American Revolution and was assigned by Washington to design the new Capitol. His plan used a street grid as its foundation, then placed wide diagonal avenues, square circles, and long sight lines on top of it. This style was influenced by European Baroque urban planning, especially capitals where state power was expressed through grand axes, broad avenues, and views directed towards central buildings. But Washington, D.C. was not a simple copy of Paris or Versailles. The city was built for a republic where power had to be presented differently from the palaces of kings. For that reason, the axes leading to the Capitol, the President's House public squares, and open spaces became a political language made of stone land and streets. When viewed from above, the diagonal streets, cutting through the grid, create the feeling that the city was built upon a chessboard of power, where every route might carry symbolic meaning. Occult interpreters look at those diagonals and recognize triangles, stars, ritual axes, circles, and points of convergence. Some believe this is a sign of sacred geometry, where the city was arranged to absorb direct or represent a form of political energy. A simpler interpretation is that L'Enfant wanted to create a capital that was orderly, grand, easy to navigate, and rich in symbolism. Whichever perspective one takes, the result remains clear. Washington, D.C. was designed to make those who enter it feel that they are standing at the center of a project larger than ordinary daily life. Point zero. The United States Capitol was placed on a hill at the center where the 4 quadrants of the city meet, known as Point Zero. This design was meant to remind all future members of Congress that strength and power belong to the people and the states gathered together, not to a single individual or a king. The capital stands in a special position because it is the central point that divides the entire city into 4 clear sections: northwest, northeast, southwest, and southeast. From this position, the street system is arranged in a very understandable way. Streets running east to west are named with letters such as A, B, C, and so on, while streets running north to south are numbered such as 1st, 2nd, 3rd, and so on. In addition, each address includes a quadrant marker such as northwest, northeast, southwest, or southeast to identify the exact location. In practical terms, this layout helps residents and visitors find their way and locate themselves in the city. Symbolically placing the capital at the center carries a very clear meaning. This is where the legislative power of the nation gathers, where the states send representatives to debate and make laws. It shows that power does not rest in the hands of an individual or a king, but belongs to the representative system of the people. This choice differs from the organization of monarchies in Europe. In many old capitals, the king's palace stood at the center of power. In Washington, D.C., the legislative building holds the main axis of political meaning. This shows that the founding fathers wanted to turn the city into a lesson written in space. Executive power has its own place, but the center of the republic must be where the representatives of the people and the states gather. However, from a Masonic perspective, the capital may be viewed as the central point, like the keystone in a great structure. The streets, avenues, squares, and sightlines become measuring lines, while the city functions like a massive architectural drawing. In Masonic thinking, outer construction and inner construction are always related. A nation is like a building. If the foundation is crooked, the building will lean, and if the cornerstone is wrong, the entire structure that follows will be affected. The symbol of the compass, the square, the letter G, and the great architect. The square and compass, this is the most universal symbol of Freemasonry, although they originated as the tools of medieval stonemasons. Freemasonry sees them as carrying deep metaphorical meaning. The square represents exemplary conduct and a proper way of life, while the compass reminds human beings to regulate their own behavior and keep themselves within proper moral boundaries. They use the image of constructing a building as a metaphor for building and perfecting human character. The origin of Freemasonry is tied to the image of builders, stonemasons, and the men who built great churches in the Middle Ages. They used the square to test right angles, the compass to measure circles, the plumb line to keep vertical alignment, and the trowel to bind stones together with mortar. When the tradition moved from operative masonry to speculative masonry, meaning from actual building work to a philosophical fraternity, those tools became moral symbols. The square reminds a mason to live uprightly in communication, contracts, promises, and responsibilities. The compass reminds him to keep desire, ambition, and behavior within proper limits. The measuring rod, the rough stone, the polished stone, the pillars, the ladder, and the temple are all used as metaphors for the process of self-cultivation. From this viewpoint, a human being is born like an unfinished stone, and moral life is the process of being cut, polished, corrected, and placed in the proper position within a greater structure. The letter G in the great architect. At the center of the compass and square is the letter G. This G is the first letter of the word geometry, because in their worldview, geometry is a synonym for Freemasonry. Through these geometric symbols, they communicate deep ideas and call God the grand architect of the universe, or the great geometer. The letter G is also often understood as God depending on the tradition and degree of the ritual. It is the combination of geometry and God that makes Freemasonry so distinctive in the eyes of outsiders. To them, the universe is not a random mixture. The order of straight lines, angles, circles, proportions, and structures reflects the intelligence of the architect. When a Mason studies geometry, he is not merely studying mathematics. He is learning to see the world as a structure with measurements, foundations, and purpose. This idea fit the 18th century very well. That age believed in natural law, Newtonian mechanics, the design of the universe, and the ability of human reason to understand the order of creation. The Founding Fathers were born into that world. Many of them read the Bible, Roman law, Enlightenment philosophy, ancient history, and European political texts. When Masonic symbols entered that environment, they provided a special language the new nation could be understood as a structure that needed to be designed, measured, founded, and handed down to future generations. We often hear of George Washington, Benjamin Franklin, or Thomas Jefferson as gifted politicians. But in ancient records, they were also known by another name, brothers in Freemasonry. Here we must carefully distinguish between certain records and expanded legend. George Washington was a Freemason with clear documentation. Benjamin Franklin was also a prominent Mason, having held an important role in the Grand Lodge of Pennsylvania and helped bring Masonic books into the life of colonial America. With Thomas Jefferson, stronger documentation places him within the stream of Enlightenment thought and intellectual circles of his youth, while evidence of official Masonic membership remains a subject of debate. Even so, these three figures together represent an early American leadership class that lived among reasoned classical learning symbolism and the fraternal networks of the 18th century. The important point is not to turn every founding father into a member of one single secret society. The real weight lies in the cultural environment they shared. It was a world of public rituals, private letters, learned societies, fraternities, natural philosophy, classical architecture, and the belief that symbols could educate an entire people. Therefore, when America chose symbols for the Great Seal, built its capital, and presented its power, it was not working in a vacuum. It used the very language that the elites of that time understood deeply. Geometry, classicism, the Bible, Rome, Greece, and ritual. Freemasonry is not only a charitable organization, it is a secret society with rituals kept private for hundreds of years, where the concept of the grand architect of the universe is honored. And can you believe it? They did not build America only with laws. They built it with geometry. Geometry here becomes the language of power. Law creates the invisible frame for society, while the city creates the visible frame for power. The dollar bill places symbols into the pockets of the people, the map of the capital. Places symbols into living space, and the cornerstone ceremony places symbols into political memory. When these three layers combine, America appears not only as a nation declared by text, but as a structure built with words, stone streets, and signs. If you look at the map of Washington, D.C. from above, the avenues and buildings are not arranged randomly. The designers of that time, who were Freemasons, skillfully inserted occult symbols into the heart of the city. This belief comes from an ancient idea space can influence human beings. Temples, pyramids, Gothic cathedrals, palace squares, and imperial capitals were all built according to axes, directions, proportions, and sightlines. When a crowd enters a grand space, they feel power before they read any document. That is why empires have always built on a massive scale. The larger the building, the longer the axis, the wider the square, the more human beings feel that they are standing before a force greater than the individual. Washington, D.C. uses this principle very effectively. The Capitol on the hill, the White House on its own axis, the National Mall stretching like a stage of national memory, and the memorials rising as anchors in the public mind. For those who believe in sacred geometry, these structures do not merely direct traffic and state ceremony. They also direct emotion belief and the way citizens imagine power. The Founding Fathers, George Washington and the mark of Freemasonry. President George Washington directly brought Masonic marks into the building of the American Capitol. In the year 1791, he appointed the French architect Pierre-Charles L'Enfant to design a new capital city with a utopian character, instead of the chaotic street model common in European cities at the time. Washington was deeply involved in approving L'Enfant's designs, and this design contained countless symbolic layers associated with the Freemasons. Washington was not only the victorious general of the American Revolution, he also understood the power of public imagery very well. A new nation needed a new capital, new rituals, new symbols and buildings solemn enough to replace the aura of British monarchy. The choice of L'Enfant shows that Washington wanted the federal capital to become a declaration in space, broad, orderly, far-seeing, and dignified enough to represent the Republic. The special point lies in the combination of democratic ideals and the ancient language of power. America declared that power came from the people, yet built its capital in a style that made anyone entering it feel as if they were standing inside a great ritual of the state. This creates a tension that continues to this day. Washington, D.C. is both a symbol of the Republic and carries the appearance of an imperial stage. It is precisely this tension that feeds questions about secret societies, symbols, and power behind the political curtain. The chessboard of the underworld. So the freedom that America worships, is it the freedom of the people, or a freedom kept under the control of the architects standing behind the velvet curtain? Behind the familiar slogans of democracy, individual liberty, the Constitution and civil rights history has always revealed another face: secret groups, fraternal rituals, elite networks, ancient symbols and meetings where the public is allowed to see only the outer shell. Freemasonry and the Illuminati are the two most mysterious secret societies today. On the surface, they wrap themselves in beautiful robes. Freemasonry preaches liberty, equality, and fraternity, while the Illuminati claims to work for a new world order. But in truth, both of these organizations belong to Satan. So if the conspiracy theory that these groups manipulate the world is true, then it is extremely dangerous. That danger lies in the fact that groups like this often operate through a multi-layered model. On the outside, there is charity, learning, self-improvement, the exchange of knowledge, and social connection. On the inside, there are rituals, oaths, ranks, symbols, and closed circles that outsiders can hardly access. When an organization has a presence in politics, finance, the military, the media, education, and international institutions, the question of its true influence becomes far more sensitive. The origins of Freemasonry. Although the Freemasonry movement originated from the stonemason guilds of the Middle Ages, most members of the movement were not masters of stone construction. It is believed that as the number of members who were actual stonemasons declined, the group began accepting speculative or honorary members in order to increase its membership. The modern form of Freemasonry began in the 18th century, the Age of Enlightenment, when educated Englishmen sought to socialize with one another and discuss philosophy, religion, and life in an organized environment. At first, the image of the Mason had a completely practical meaning. In the Middle Ages, the men who built cathedrals, castles, and great stone structures needed skills in measurement calculation, professional secrecy, and the ability to move from one construction site to another. They had signs of recognition work, rules, apprenticeship systems, and standards for distinguishing new workers from skilled craftsmen. As Europe entered a new age, building tools, such as the square compass, plumb line, rough stone, and polished stone, gradually became moral symbols. From that point onward, modern Freemasonry slowly moved away from material construction in the traditional sense. They began speaking about building the human being. A new member was compared to an unfinished stone that needed to be polished through learning morality, discipline, ritual, and fraternal relationships. The image of building a temple became a metaphor for building character, society, and finally, a civilized order according to their ideals. Fraternal organizations had existed for centuries. But in the 18th century, many male groups named after the English taverns where they met came together into an organization they called the Grand Lodge, an association that would gather to perform rituals and festivals as well as initiate new members. Now known as the Premier Grand Lodge of England. This group was the first organization of its kind, and as membership increased, the list of secret rituals and festivals, as well as the requirements for becoming a member, also increased. In 1717, 4 lodges in London joined together and established the first Grand Lodge. This event marked an important turning point. Scattered groups began to have a central organization. Rituals became more standardized, the membership network expanded, and Freemasonry entered the lives of intellectuals, merchants, politicians, publishers, officers, and influential people in English society. As the British Empire expanded, Masonic lodges also followed the routes of trade, the military in the colonies, moving from Europe to North America, the Caribbean, India, and many other regions. According to the Masonic Service Association of North America, as of the year 2020, there were about 898,000 Freemasons in the United States and an estimated 6 million members worldwide. Modern numbers show that this movement once reached a very large scale, especially in the United States after the Second World War. Although membership has declined over many decades, Freemasonry still maintains a broad network, local lodges, charitable funds, hospitals, scholarships, and many affiliated organizations. Therefore, their influence does not lie only in closed rituals, but also in social networks. One person knows another person, one person introduces another person, one person supports another person, and across many generations, those relationships can create a layer of soft power that is very difficult to measure. Who can become a Freemason? Before answering this question, look at the names that once knelt and swore oaths inside their darkened lodges. Did you know that the blueprint of America was in truth shaped by hands wearing Masonic rings? History records that at least 14 presidents of the United States and a series of great founding fathers were loyal builders. From George Washington, the first president Thomas Jefferson, the man who drafted the Declaration of Independence, to James Monroe, Andrew Jackson, Theodore Roosevelt, and Harry S. Truman. Even Benjamin Franklin, the brilliant mind of America, and John Hancock, the man who left the largest and boldest signature on the Declaration of Independence, were figures who held core power within this secret society. They did not merely build a nation. They carried the esoteric ideas of Freemasonry to construct a new world order. Today, the door into Freemasonry seems to have been opened slightly. The basic requirements sound extremely simple. At first, you must be a man, have good moral character, be recommended by another member of the fraternity, and commit to obeying the ancient customs absolutely. But the key point, and also the greatest secret, lies in one mandatory condition: you must believe in a supreme being. Freemasonry declares that it rises above ordinary religious boundaries. Here, they use a shared title for the Creator, the Grand Architect of the universe. This is a brilliant ideological move. The phrase creates a massive umbrella covering every faith. Inside the lodge, a Christian, a Muslim, or a Jew can sit beside one another. Each person defines the Grand Architect according to his own belief system. And yet, this very inclusiveness has ignited a fierce hidden war lasting for centuries. The Catholic Church and conservative Christian denominations have strongly condemned this organization. According to the Vatican, locking all faiths together under one closed ritual system suffocates the uniqueness of God. Even more dangerously, when blood oaths, esoteric symbols, and rituals are elevated to a level of absolute sacredness, members can unknowingly be drawn into a parallel religion, a place where loyalty to the lodge may even overshadow loyalty to the cross, the evolutionary journey of a builder. Once you step through the door of the lodge, every worldly title is stripped away as you enter a severe hierarchy. The journey of a Freemason is divided into 3 symbolic degrees, imitating the process of building a great structure. Degree 1, entered apprentice. Like a blacksmith striking away the rough edges of a raw stone. At this degree, the candidate begins learning how to keep silent train iron discipline and become familiar with the coded language of the fraternity. Degree 2, Fellowcraft. This is the stage where the rough stone begins to take shape. The worker learns to understand the order of the universe, trains scientific thinking, and establishes his position within a larger system of power. Degree 3, Master Mason. The peak of the Masonic art. This degree is tied to a ritual that imitates death and rebirth, testing absolute loyalty and the protection of secrets until the final breath. Throughout this journey, they communicate through a system of symbols rooted deeply in the human subconscious. The square and compass represent the measure of moral standards and the boundaries of behavior. The beehive suggests cooperation and a tightly connected global network. And most especially, the all-seeing eye, the wakeful eye shining at the top of the pyramid, symbolizing the eternal gaze of the grand architect over every movement of humanity. The entire system of power and ritual in Freemasonry converges upon one image, the Temple of Solomon. To them, the Temple of Solomon is not merely an architectural structure in the Bible. It is the perfect blueprint of the universe. Every stone, every measurement, every direction of construction, and even the giant pillars contain distinct codes. The ritual of the Master Mason revolves around the tragic death of Hiram Abif, the legendary chief architect of the temple, who chose martyrdom rather than surrender the sacred password of the builders. This has created a wave of outrage among critics. They accuse Freemasonry of quietly stealing the most sacred images in the Bible, distorting them and reshaping them into a dark, esoteric system. They created a matrix with tens of thousands of layers of meaning, where outsiders see only a virtuous outer covering, while the most essential truths are revealed only to Master Masons at the highest degrees. To understand the level of scheming danger and how far the octopus-like arms of these secret societies have reached, let us look at how one of the oldest religious powers in the world has treated them. Why did the Roman Catholic Church, an organization that constantly teaches tolerance order, an absolute ban on Freemasonry? On the surface, Freemasonry builds a perfect outer mask. When not conducting elaborate initiation rituals, they often participate in community service, charity, school building, and mutual support. An organization that is not a religion, yet diligently does good works, why should it not be accepted? The truth is that the Catholic Church saw through the danger hidden behind that humanistic mask. The ban on Catholics joining Freemasonry has a very long history. Since the 18th century, popes have condemned Freemasonry many times. What worried the Vatican was not that Masons distributed relief or built houses. The fear and outrage lay in the dark ideological foundation behind the organization's secrecy, blood oaths, heterodox rituals, and the concept of a divine being, so broad that it could equate God with any other entity. Masonic lodges were in truth breeding grounds for anti-clerical ideas in Europe. In 1983, the Vatican's Congregation for the Doctrine of the Faith delivered a firm blow. Their principles have always been considered irreconcilable with the doctrine of the Church, and therefore membership in them remains forbidden. The faithful who enroll in Masonic associations are in a state of grave sin and may not receive Holy Communion. This statement crushed any illusion that the ban had been loosened. Through the lens of traditional Christianity, this is an extremely cunning move of the devil. A system with an outward appearance that seems deeply moral and humanistic, yet in truth, secretly tempts human beings to place secret rituals and their own idea of enlightenment above faith and salvation. It is a safe refuge for those carrying heretical aims. The danger of Freemasonry does not stop at religion. It also digs deep into political power, creating a hidden panic in society. Although the surface rules of most lodges forbid members from discussing partisan politics, reality strikes directly against the innocence of the public. Countless members are major figures in government, and this is when the image of the chessboard of the underworld appears. Think about it: when an organization possesses life and death oaths, closed-door rituals, and a membership network stretching from judges, officers, businessmen, and lawyers to politicians at the head of nations, the public has every right to shudder and ask the question, will these people prioritize the law and the nation, or prioritize the fraternal oath to protect one another in the dark? Their hidden support introductions and endorsements become one of the most ruthless forms of invisible power, one you will never see written clearly on paper. That murkiness has given birth to countless conspiracy theories claiming that all Freemasons act as one unified bloc, are connected to modern anti-Jewish conspiracy theories, and serve as effective agents of a new world order that manipulates global finance. In modern culture, the image of Freemasonry is often mixed together with the Illuminati, financial elites, international banks, the Vatican, the United Nations, Bilderberg, or Skull and Bones. This mixture creates a frightening supermyth. Every major upheaval in the world, from war to disease, is being pulled by strings from one single control center. The world is a chessboard, and secret societies are the hands moving the sacrificial pawns. Of course, historically speaking, the picture is more complicated than that. But it cannot be denied that elite groups are real, closed meetings are real, and dense networks of power are real. Even now, as Freemasonry's membership is said to be gradually declining because of the growth of the internet, where only a few minutes on Google can expose leaked secrets that creates a frightening paradox. When secrecy is eroded, people become even more suspicious that this is only the visible tip of the iceberg deliberately thrown out to the public. A much deeper, darker layer may still have never been revealed. But you know, Freemasonry is not the only organization capable of doing this. Throughout history, power has always liked to gather itself into closed circles. To see how subtle this pattern of manipulation truly is, we must step back into the Middle Ages with the appearance of the Knights Templar. Founded around the year 1118 to protect pilgrims traveling to the Holy Land, the Templars were initially only a poor order of knights. But with a mysterious form of backing within only a few decades, they became one of the most powerful organizations in Europe, controlling entire systems of finance, banking, and military force. An organization bearing the name of God, yet possessing lands, fortresses, fleets of ships, and an early form of banking whose tentacles stretched across continents. Their iron discipline and their position stationed directly upon the legendary foundation of Solomon's Temple made them the center of chilling rumors. People whispered that they had excavated the Ark of the Covenant, the Holy Grail, or even heretical texts hiding the truth about Jesus. Their power became so great that King Philip IV of France, who was drowning in debt to this very organization, was terrified. In the year 1307, in a brutal campaign, hundreds of Knights Templar were arrested, savagely tortured, and burned alive. The accusations against them horrified all of Europe: heresy, desecration of the cross, and the worship of demons, Baphomet. Although they were dissolved, the collapse of the Templars left behind a perfect blueprint for later secret societies. Accumulate massive wealth, seize control of finance, command military power, and operate beneath a sacred outer covering. And from the ashes of those legends, a force 100 times more cruel and cunning rose up: the Illuminati. Today, the Illuminati is labeled as an underground organization controlling global governments and economies. Historically, this society was founded in Bavaria in the year 1776 by Adam Weishaupt, a scheming professor of law. Unlike other organizations, the Illuminati called themselves the Perfectibilists, but the name Illuminati itself carries a chilling implication, those enlightened by Satan. The nature of the Illuminati is not only that of a political organization, it is part of a satanic cult. Many anti-secret society historical documents accuse them of performing horrifying black masses behind closed doors. Although we will not go deeply into those bloody details, the most important thing you need to understand is the supreme mechanism of deception used by this organization. They never step into the light wearing the face of demons. They come to humanity with the most beautiful language, enlightenment, freedom, equality, human rights, and global peace. Weishaupt believed that human beings had been corrupted by traditional religion, and that the goal of the Illuminati was to destroy all religions, erase national borders, and establish a new world order controlled dictatorially by an elite class people who claimed for themselves a status equal to God. They used infiltration like a virus. Instead of building from scratch, the Illuminati planted their people inside existing Masonic lodges, borrowing the network of Freemasonry to spread subversive ideas. This disguise is their greatest crime in the name of enlightenment. They attacked traditional religion and completely pushed the role of God out of human life. They brainwashed the public into believing that human beings could create a perfect paradise on earth by themselves, a new world order based on science and elite power, without any need for sacred salvation. Remember this: carefully, Satan or Lucifer is extremely cunning and always seeks every way to attack God. Therefore, groups that worship Satan are evil groups, and human beings should not join them. Although it was banned in the year 1783, the poison of the Illuminati had already spread across Europe and crossed the ocean, reaching a young land called America. Perhaps when you hear this, you may quietly click your tongue and think, what do those distant secret societies have to do with my ordinary life? All right then, let us temporarily set aside the grand theories. Let us not yet speak about how secret societies may have controlled politics, interfered in science and technology, manipulated the economy, currency, or global media. Let us look at only one aspect: the thing you still watch and listen to every day for entertainment. What would happen if a satanic cult, such as the Illuminati, infiltrated and seized control of the entire showbiz industry? The first and most tragic victims would be the superstars, those who personally signed contracts, selling away their own souls. History has recorded chilling glimpses of devilish contracts. Let us speak of Robert Johnson, the American blues legend. The story says that he was once a terribly poor guitar player, mocked everywhere he went. But after disappearing for a period of time, and then returning, Johnson suddenly possessed a guitar technique so extraordinary it seemed supernatural. People in Mississippi spread the rumor that he had gone to a deserted crossroads at midnight, met the devil, and exchanged his soul for musical talent. Another blues musician, Tommy Johnson, carried the same rumor when his own brother declared that Tommy had made a pact with the devil at a crossroads. Going further back into the past, we have Niccolò Paganini, the Italian violin genius. His lightning-fast playing, combined with his tall, thin, pale appearance and strangely long fingers, made the public of that age firmly believe that he was a child of the devil, or that he had sold himself to the devil in exchange for magical hands. And in the modern age, Infernus, born in the year 1972, the founder of the black metal band Gorgoroth, did not even try to hide it. He is one of the rare artists who openly declared that he made a pact with the devil in the year 1992 in order to form the band, proudly worshiping Satan before the eyes of the public. But that's not all. Many music superstars and A-list movie stars of the modern world have been suspected of being members of the Illuminati. Most of them remain silent, but a few among them have courageously, or under such pressure that they slipped, admitted that this is not a conspiracy theory. It is the truth. In a television interview with host Ruby Rose of Australian TV, the Queen of Pop, Katy Perry, accidentally uttered a confession that sent chills down the spines of her fans. She said, "I released a gospel record when I was 15 years old because I grew up in a family where everything I ever heard was gospel music. I really wanted to be like the music star, Amy Grant, but I did not succeed. So, I sold my soul to the devil." As for Lady Gaga in the documentary Gaga 5'2", she personally revealed a story carrying the heavy color of an occult transaction. She recalled a moment in the year 2006 at a club on the Lower East Side of New York. A young man in a suit appeared. He said to me, "I think you have everything it takes. Do you want it?" I asked what it was. He smiled in a chilling way and said, "Everything. Success, fame, wealth, power. Do you want all of it?" Lady Gaga remembered that fateful moment. I looked him straight in the eyes and said that I wanted all of it. I told him I would do anything, and after that promise to surrender her soul, the door of the Illuminati opened. The devil always keeps his word. Satan gave Lady Gaga all the glory she had once desired, but the real tragedy also began from there. His promise came true very quickly. But it did not last long before I began falling into misery, she bitterly admitted. Chronic pain, fibromyalgia, and many kinds of illness began draining her body. There were periods when the female star could not stand steadily, had to cancel tours, and sank into extreme pain. The devil gives you light, but he will drain your life force as the price for that glory. The manipulation of the underworld is terrifying because it spares no one. The most dangerous and shocking thing is not the world of artists, but when these soul contracts infiltrate intellectual circles, historical figures, and especially those who wear religious robes. History once shuddered before Johann Georg Faust around the years 1480 to 1541, a German alchemist and magician of the Renaissance. His life immersed in dark arts became the model for the classic play, Faust, by the great poet Goethe, where the main character willingly sells his soul to the demon Mephistopheles in exchange for endless knowledge and worldly pleasures of desire. Or look at Gilles de Rais from the year 1405 to 1440, a famous marshal of France who had once been a life and death comrade in battle with the heroine Joan of Arc. After retiring from military service and falling into crushing debt, this noble marshal completely lost himself. He set up rituals to summon demons and carried out a series of extremely brutal child sacrifice rites, driven by the insane hope that Satan would restore his wealth and power. But the most horrifying evidence of demonic presence belongs to Urbain Grandier from the year 1590 to 1634. A French priest put on trial for witchcraft. At the historic trial that determined his life, people presented a piece of evidence that left everyone present speechless, a real written contract. That dark covenant was said to have been signed directly between Father Grandier and a series of the most powerful demons in hell, including Lucifer and the sea monster Leviathan. It was written in Latin, and more horrifying still, all the letters were written backward. A perfect symbol of the inversion of every sacred order, a bloody mockery by demons against God. Whether at the lonely crossroads of an unknown musician inside a crowded New York club belonging to a pop star, or within the closed room of a priest, the rules of the underworld never change. The perfection, power, and bright fame offered by the Illuminati are like deadly bait. When you nod and accept Lucifer's radiant cloak, you think you are stepping onto the summit of the world. But in truth, you have forever handed the key of your destiny over to darkness. This is where the story returns to the dollar bills and the United States of America. As we know, the men who gave birth to America, George Washington, Benjamin Franklin, and Paul Revere, were all members of Freemasonry. The English Grand Lodge was born in the year 1717, but ancient poems such as the Regius poem suggest that they existed as early as the 1390s, even connecting their origins all the way back to the ancient Temple of Solomon. On the surface, Freemasonry in America preached individual liberty, democracy, and the establishment of public schools. But critics have exposed this contradiction if they truly aimed only at charity and moral education. Why would they need blood oaths, sealed rituals, and a strict hierarchical structure? Why do mystical symbols deeply marked by a new order appear so densely on the national currency and in the architectural plan of the most powerful capital in the world? The existence of the fraternity is public. But what truly happens behind those closed doors remains forever a dark, black hole. And this network of manipulation did not disappear when America modernized. It only changed names and burrowed deeper into the training grounds of the elite. Look at Skull and Bones at Yale University. Founded in the year 1832, this society meets inside a dark, windowless building called the Tomb. Every year they recruit exactly 15 students, a small number but one that plants the seeds of sweeping power. Former members of the Tomb include American presidents such as Bush the father and Bush the son, secretaries of state, senators such as John Kerry, and powerful figures in the CIA, finance, and media. In the year 2004, the entire world witnessed a fierce presidential election between George W. Bush and John Kerry. Millions of voters argued and divided themselves, believing they were choosing between two opposing sides. But the brutal truth was, both candidates came from the same tomb of skull and bones. The political world that seemed like a fierce competitive chessboard turned out to be only two pieces of different colors, pulled by hands that had once sworn oaths together in a forbidden ritual during their student years. If Skull and Bones manipulates America, then the Bilderberg Group manipulates the rest of the earth. This organization has met once every year since the year 1954, gathering political, financial, technological, and media elites from North America and Europe. They rent out entire luxury hotels, protected by heavily armed security. The press is absolutely not allowed to approach. They whisper to one another about war currency energy and the shaping of global social policy under the rule of no named attribution. Critics call this the secret government of the world. From Freemasonry, the Templars, the Illuminati, and Skull and Bones, to Bilderberg, all of them follow one chilling pattern of manipulation. Those with power create dark spaces to recognize one another and make agreements with one another before the public can know anything. The underground nervous system of the global order is nourished inside lodges, tombs, and closed hotel rooms. And we ordinary human beings are only allowed to see the stage after they have already arranged the script and pulled the curtain open. The most frightening thing does not lie in whether these secret societies gather to worship demons or not. The truly terrifying thing is this: humanity seems to have been brainwashed, becoming too accustomed to allowing a tiny handful of people to sit together in the dark, sketch out the future for billions, and calmly call it the normal operation of democracy. So tonight, when we look again at the lifeless eye on the $1 bill, when we look again at the avenues of Washington, D.C., the greatest question still hovers over us like a haunting shadow. Are we truly living in a free civilization? Or are we merely dragging our feet across a blood-soaked chessboard, already sketched out by architects whose faces we have never once seen? What do you think about this conspiracy theory? Leave a comment below the video so we can discuss it together. If the symbols on the dollar bill and the layout of Washington, D.C. show how the hand of the underworld has manipulated the space of America, then the next piece we are about to uncover will take you into an even greater fear: the manipulation of time and human life. When a nation is conceived through covenants of darkness, the price will never be paid in money. It will be paid in blood. And that price was demanded back on the very day Americans consider their most glorious. Welcome to the second piece. The July 4th curse, the terrifying coincidence of the first 3 presidents. Imagine this. What secret has history deliberately hidden behind the chilling events that aligned so perfectly on the very Independence Day of the United States of America? On July 4th, 1776, the Declaration of Independence was signed, giving birth to a mighty empire. More precisely, according to historical records, July 4th was the day the Continental Congress adopted the Declaration of Independence. The official parchment copy was prepared afterward, and the delegates began signing it on August 2nd. But in the memory of America, July 4th still became the moment of national birth. This was the day the 13 colonies declared their separation from the Kingdom of Great Britain, stepping onto a path no one could know for certain would lead to freedom or destruction. The Declaration of Independence was not only a political document, it was an oath before history. The men who signed their names understood that if the revolution failed, they could be seen as traitors to the British crown and pay the price with property honor and even life itself. For that reason, July 4th carried a ritual color from the very beginning. It did not merely open a new government, it marked a blood covenant between human beings, power, and fate. But did you know that 3 of the most powerful founding fathers, the men who had directly dipped their goose feather pens into ink to sign that covenant, would later breathe their final breaths on the exact same date, July 4th? Was this only a long-running joke of history, a cold arrangement of the stars above? Or was it in truth a curse haunting the lives of those who dared to put pen to paper and create a nation? Let us travel back through time together, returning to the strangest deathbed moments in the history of the White House. It was the year 1826. America was shining in its golden jubilee. Exactly 50 years had passed since that fateful day in 1776, when the 13 colonies officially cut their chains from the British Empire. Across the streets, people hung flags and flowers, sang songs, and raised their glasses to toast the endurance of a free nation. But in 2 distant hidden corners of the country, death was quietly knocking on the bedroom doors of 2 of the greatest men. At the Monticello estate in Virginia, Thomas Jefferson, the 3rd President of the United States and the main author of the Declaration of Independence, lay dying. The famous sentence about all men being created equal had helped make him one of the most remembered figures in American political history. Yet tragically, now at the height of his fame, he was gasping on a sickbed. As fever drained the last drops of life from his body, the mind of this 83-year-old man clung to only one thought. He kept waking from delirium, whispering the same question to his doctor: "Has the 4th arrived?" And as if he had been waiting for permission from an invisible force, when the doctor nodded and confirmed that the dawn of July 4th, 1826 had arrived, Thomas Jefferson breathed his last at 12:50 in the afternoon. But the chill of history had only just begun. At the same time, more than 800 kilometers away in Massachusetts, the 2nd President of the United States, John Adams, was also dying. Adams was not only Jefferson's predecessor, he was also his brother, his rival, and the man who had stood shoulder to shoulder with him in pushing forward the Declaration of Independence. As dusk slowly fell, while the sounds of celebratory fireworks echoed outside the window, John Adams whispered his final words. Thomas Jefferson survived. He closed his eyes and passed away at 6:20 in the evening, never knowing that his old friend had been taken by death several hours earlier. That sentence made Americans at the time shudder. 2 founding fathers, 2 minds that gave birth to America, both died on the exact same day, July 4th, 1826, exactly on the 50th anniversary of the nation's birth. Ask any mathematician or statistician about the probability that 2 presidents, 2 of the greatest founding fathers, would die on the exact 50th anniversary of the great national holiday they themselves helped create. The odds are 1 in billions. It was so unreasonable that the American people of that time shuddered and began whispering about a supernatural hand interfering in the destiny of the nation. But if you think two men were only a coincidence, history decided to add a third blade to crush every doubt. Exactly 5 years later, July 4th, 1831, the fifth president of the United States, James Monroe, the last founding father of that great generation, also became the third president to fall on the nation's birthday. James Monroe belonged to the final generation of presidents considered founding fathers. He had fought in the American Revolution, served as Senator Governor of Virginia, Ambassador to France, and Britain's Secretary of State, Secretary of War, and then became the fifth president. His name is tied to the Monroe Doctrine, a foreign policy view that later became a pillar of how America looked at the Western Hemisphere. When Monroe left the White House, he entered his final years under financial pressure, illness, and family loss. His wife died. His close son-in-law also passed away. His health declined and debts accumulated over many years of public service left him living in hardship. By 1831, Monroe was living at his daughter's home in New York. On July 4th, he breathed his final breath. Once again, the clock of life struck exactly on Independence Day. The first three presidents, three men who signed and defended the founding covenant, all were called by death on July 4th. This curse became so haunting that in 1836, when the fourth president, James Madison, lay sick in bed at the end of June, doctors proposed giving him the strongest stimulants, trying to prolong his life until July 4th, so that he could complete the destiny. But Madison refused that artificial arrangement, and he died on June 28th. What secret has history hidden behind these chilling events? Was this merely an extraordinary biological coincidence? An arrangement of the stars meant to honor those who had completed their historical mission? Or an invisible curse haunting the hands that shaped an empire? From a rational perspective, all three men died at advanced ages by the standards of their time. Jefferson was 83 years old. Adams was 90 years old. Monroe was 73 years old. All of them had endured years of illness, weakness, and mental pressure. Medicine can explain each death individually through age, healthcare conditions, and personal circumstances. But history sometimes makes people uneasy, especially when individual explanations are still not enough to erase the feeling of a strange coincidence. 50 years is a milestone carrying many special meanings. In biblical tradition, the 50th year evokes the Jubilee, the year of joy, the year of liberation, the year when land is returned, debts are forgiven, and order is restored. When Jefferson and Adams died together on the Jubilee of American independence, many people of their time saw it as a sign from God. America seemed to have been given a farewell ritual. The two men who had opened the door of independence were called home at the very moment the nation they created crossed the half-century mark. From a mystical perspective, the issue is framed in an entirely different way. If the $1 bill carries the eye of providence and the unfinished pyramid, if Washington, D.C. is placed inside a geometry of power, then July 4th can be seen as a ritual anchor point of the nation. Every year, the people repeat the same cycle, raising flags, singing songs, setting off fireworks, declaring patriotism, and retelling the story of the founding. A day carrying so much meaning is easily seen as a place where omens appear. And if there is a curse, it may lie directly inside the first contradiction of America. The founders spoke about universal liberty, yet the new nation still left hundreds of thousands of people living in chains. The Declaration spoke of the right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, yet on southern plantations, many human lives were bought, sold, separated, beaten, exploited, and passed from one owner to another like property. On the very birthday of a freedom celebration rang out beside the sighs of those excluded from that promise. Whether the deaths of the three presidents carry a spiritual color or not, July 4th itself in American history already contains dark shadows and bitter paradoxes. Historical documents show that behind the brilliance of the July 4th holiday, not everyone felt the same complete joy. For many free white Americans in the 19th century, this was a day to remember victory over Britain and take pride in independence. But for millions of black people living under slavery, this day reminded them of a deeply painful truth. They were still treated as property bought and sold, beaten, torn from their families, forced into exhausting labor without any human rights, while words about freedom and equality rang out on the very land where they were oppressed. There were people who read the Declaration of Independence in the morning, speaking of liberty and human rights, but returned in the afternoon to manage plantations where others had to labor painfully without choice. In church, people prayed for the freedom of the nation. Yet even in that same space, human beings were still separated by skin color and status. For that reason, July 4th seemed to carry two different meanings. In the streets, there were flags, music, fireworks, congratulations, and pride. But in other places, on plantations, in kitchens, at docks, or inside workshops, this day reminded many people that freedom still did not belong to them. That contrast is what makes this holiday so special. It expresses beautiful ideals while also reflecting the unfinished parts of history. The activist Frederick Douglass, in a historic speech in 1852, exposed this brutal truth. He described dragging an enslaved man in chains into the grand illuminated Temple of Liberty and demanding that he sing joyful songs as inhuman mockery and sacrilegious irony. For millions of enslaved people at that time, July 4th was not a day of freedom, but the day that most clearly exposed injustice and cruelty. Douglass sharply criticized the prayers, hymns, and cheers about liberty on that day as empty words as fraud, deception, impiety, and hypocrisy, a thin veil to cover up crimes. That speech was delivered on July 5th, 1852, in Rochester, New York, before an anti-slavery society. At that time, Douglass was a man who had escaped slavery and become one of the most powerful speakers, writers, and activists in the struggle against that system. He did not stand outside America to curse it. He used the very language of the Declaration of Independence to force America to face its own promise. His famous question, "What to the slave is the 4th of July?" raised an important question about the meaning of this holiday. To the free, it was a day of glory. To those in chains, it was painful evidence of hypocrisy. Douglass did not deny the moral power of the Declaration. On the contrary, he saw the founding principles as high enough to condemn the very nation that was betraying them. This is what made his speech dangerous. It used the light of freedom to shine directly into the darkness of the Republic. In the most forceful passage, Douglass described the bells cannons, parades, prayers, and hymns as layers of sound covering up crime. He made his listeners feel the contrast between the festive scene and the reality of slavery. When white Americans celebrated independence, enslaved families could still be sold apart. When speakers talked about human rights, people kidnapped from Africa and their descendants were still treated as property. When the nation declared that all men were created equal, the laws in many states still protected ownership of human beings. From here, the July 4th curse can be understood on a deeper level. It does not lie only in the same-day deaths of Adams, Jefferson, and Monroe. It lies inside the divided soul of America itself. One half of the nation saw that day as the beginning of freedom. The other half was forced to stand outside the feast, watching others praise a gift they had not received. When a holiday is built on an unfinished promise, history will keep returning to collect that debt. The terrifying coincidence surrounding the deaths of the founding presidents, combined with the cries against the falseness within freedom, made July 4th an even stronger center of spiritual mysteries and historical paradoxes, a holiday covered by the ghosts of the past. Those ghosts are not only the spirits of 3 presidents who died on Independence Day, they are also the shadows of those missing from the founding picture, the enslaved person on the plantation. The native person pushed away from ancestral land, the woman without full political rights, and the poor person with no voice in the rooms of power. Every year when fireworks explode in the sky, that sound evokes victory, but also reminds us of the unfinished moral battles beneath the nation's foundation. The deaths of Jefferson and Adams, at 50 years of independence, can be seen as a ritual closing of the founding generation. The death of Monroe 5 years later resembles another mark drawn onto the map of destiny. But the words of Douglas pull the entire story from the mystical realm back down to earth, where freedom must be measured by the real condition of human beings. If a nation speaks of light while still allowing many people to live in darkness, its own holiday becomes the strongest accusation against it. For that reason, July 4th is both America's birthday and a trial repeated every year. On the surface, America celebrates the day of its birth. But if we look deeper, history asks one simple question. Was the promise of freedom in 1776 truly meant for everyone, or only for those with power, money, and a voice? This question is what makes Independence Day both sacred and thought-provoking. It is sacred because it is tied to the dream of liberty and human rights, as well as the birth of a great nation. But it also makes people uneasy, because this day carries too many unfinished things, strange coincidental deaths, contradictions in history, and people who once did not receive the freedom that had been promised. If viewed simply, the fact that Adams, Jefferson, and Monroe all died on July 4th makes the day seem special, as if history were arranging something. But if viewed through fairness and morality, Frederick Douglass's speech reminds us that behind that holiday, there are still unresolved stories and people who were not treated justly. And this is the perfect point of connection with the symbols on the dollar bill that we uncovered at the beginning. Look again at the pyramid on the Great Seal. It is an unfinished pyramid. It rises powerfully, but its peak remains suspended, left open. It is exactly like America's promise of freedom, a great structure, yet still incomplete. Perhaps the greatest curse of July 4th does not come only from mysterious events, but from the very fact that the promise they made was set too high. When a nation loudly declares before the whole world that all human beings are born with the right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, that nation places itself under an enormous moral sentence. Every time it fails to fulfill that promise, every time an injustice takes place, America's birthday becomes a cold reminder of its own shortcomings. For that reason, July 4th is not merely a few frightening coincidences surrounding the deaths of presidents. It is the point where history, symbolism, and still painful questions intersect. The fact that Adams, Jefferson, and Monroe all died on this day makes people shudder and think of some kind of arrangement. As the great activist Frederick Douglass, a man who had once lived under slavery, reminded us of a bitter truth. Freedom does not live in beautiful speeches or noisy festivals. Freedom must be proven through bloody reality. And when night falls over America, every Independence Day, fireworks blaze across the sky like thousands of fiery eyes looking down upon the human world. Under that uncanny light, this nation both celebrates its own birth and is stared back at by the past. The three presidents of the founding era who have passed away, the enslaved people who once heard the bells of freedom echoing from far away, and the activists who fell in order to expand that promise, all seem to be standing together at the edge of the festival, submerged in darkness, silently asking one single question. Is July 4th truly the birthday of freedom? Or is it the day America must bow its head and answer for the oaths it wrote with its own hand? That debt collection through the lens of history is a moral interrogation, but occult researchers and those who study the underworld coldly reopen the issue from a far darker angle. If America was truly built on a Masonic chessboard, if sacred geometric symbols and the all-seeing eye are evidence of a hidden covenant with supernatural forces, then could July 4th be more than just a celebration of independence? In ancient sacrificial rituals, every covenant that borrows power demands a corresponding repayment in life. Could July 4th be the due date of a spiritual contract? The Founding Fathers borrowed great power from the underworld to give birth to an empire. And once that empire stood firmly, the very day of its birth became a day of sacrifice. That invisible force returned coldly, reclaiming the souls of those who had directly put pen to paper and signed the Declaration of Independence as a way to remind mankind that human freedom always carries its price. We will never have the exact answer to the curse of July 4th, because the darkest truths of America's history during that period of conception seem to have been deliberately shredded by someone and buried forever in a deep grave. And this brings us to the third piece: the deleted manuscripts and the prophecy of Benjamin Franklin. Would you dare believe that the flawless Declaration of Independence we see today was not the original version? There were lines that were mercilessly crossed out, concealing a terrible prophecy that the wisest founding father of America was forced to carry with him all the way to the grave. The obvious fact is that we have always been taught that the Declaration of Independence of 1776 is a masterpiece of freedom. When this historic document is mentioned, almost anyone can recite the immortal sentence that lit up the whole world: all men are created equal. That sentence spread across the world far beyond the borders of America alone. It became the language of revolutions, liberation movements, civil rights struggles, and oppressed people across the world. But when we place that sentence back into the year 1776, we begin to understand its meaning more clearly. The 13 colonies had just entered a life-and-death confrontation with the British Empire. The delegates in Philadelphia needed a document powerful enough to explain to the world why they were breaking away from the king. Jefferson, still very young at the time, was given the task of turning political rebellion into a declaration with moral force. In the first draft, the famous opening sentence had not yet taken the familiar shape we know today. Jefferson wrote that these truths were sacred and undeniable. After the editing process, that phrase became self-evident. Only a small change, but it shifted the voice from a religious tone to the language of Enlightenment reason. America wanted to say that freedom was not merely the belief of a group of rebels, but a truth that any rational human being must recognize. But if you had the chance to look at Thomas Jefferson's original handwritten draft before it was announced to the entire world, you would see a brutal truth that was mercilessly crossed out: the deleted slavery clause. In his first draft, Thomas Jefferson wrote a powerful indictment, sharply condemning slavery. He called the trade in human beings a cruel war against human nature itself, and directly blamed King George III of Britain for imposing this crime upon the American colonies. That passage targeted King George III as one offense in a long list of accusations against the British Crown. Jefferson wrote that the king had waged a cruel war against human nature, violating the most sacred rights of life and liberty of people who had been taken from their homeland, carried across the ocean, sold into slavery, or doomed to die miserably during the crossing. Jefferson's wording was very strong. The slave trade was described as war as piracy, as a cursed kind of commerce in which men were bought and sold. But that indictment also contained a major contradiction. Jefferson placed the burden of guilt on the British king, while the American colonies themselves had participated and benefited from and maintained the system of slavery. Many Southern planters needed enslaved labor to grow tobacco, rice, indigo, and later cotton. Many Northern merchants profited from shipping, insurance, finance, shipbuilding, and the various links connected to the Atlantic trade. For that reason, Jefferson's passage both carried an anti-slave trade spirit and tried to shift the greatest share of guilt toward the king. That very mixture made the passage highly controversial. It did not only accuse Britain, it unintentionally opened a mirror that forced the colonies to see themselves inside it. If the trade in human beings was a war against human nature, then those who owned, transported, insured, financed, and protected that system could not stand outside the moral indictment either. But when this deeply humanistic draft was placed on the table of the Continental Congress, it met a cold silence and then exploded into fierce opposition. In the early days of July 1776, the Continental Congress was not merely polishing style. They weighed every sentence according to whether it could preserve the alliance. The 13 colonies were in a dangerous position. The British Army was still a massive force. The war required soldiers' money, logistics, and agreement among regions with very different interests. If only a few colonies withdrew, the independence project could collapse before it truly began. For that reason, the anti-slavery passage became a spark in the room. It directly touched the economic foundation of colonies that needed to be kept inside the alliance. It exposed the greatest moral crack between the Declaration of Freedom and the reality of society. Those who wanted to separate from Britain needed immediate unity, while that passage forced them to face a second war, the war against slavery within their own midst. Delegates from southern states such as South Carolina and Georgia, where the plantation economy depended completely on the sweat and blood of enslaved labor, firmly refused to sign if that passage was not removed. Even more frightening, some northern merchants, who were making enormous profits from fleets involved in the slave trade, also chose to close their eyes. Later, Jefferson himself recorded that the passage condemning the enslavement of Africans was deleted to please South Carolina and Georgia, two colonies that still wished to continue importing enslaved people. He also admitted that his northern brethren felt uncomfortable with the rebuke because although they owned fewer enslaved people, they had still been considerable carriers in the trade of human beings. This detail is very important because it shows that we cannot simply say all guilt belonged only to the South. The structure of slavery in America was an interregional system. The South needed forced labor on plantations. The North had ships ports, merchants, financiers, and supporting industries. The Atlantic connected Africa, the Caribbean, Europe, and North America into one network of profit. When Jefferson placed those words on the table, he touched the pockets of an entire economic order. And in politics, the things that touch people's pockets often provoke reactions far stronger than moral arguments. In exchange for the fragile unity of the 13 states in order to overthrow the British Empire, the Founding Fathers made a bloody compromise. The passage condemning slavery was crossed out. The freedom of one group of people was purchased with the continuing chains of another group. But that decision left behind a contradiction that lasted through the following century. America's independence was therefore not born only from courage. It was also born from a bargain. The Declaration spoke of natural rights, but the final version avoided naming directly the system that denied those rights to hundreds of thousands of people. From that moment on, the American ideal and the American reality began walking together in tension. On one side was the promise of equality. On the other side was a system of chains that continued to be protected by law, economics, and violence. That political concession left an indelible stain and an extremely cruel paradox inside the Independence Day of July 4th. Decades later, the great activist Frederick Douglass stood before America and bitterly called this holiday the height of hypocrisy. He called those radiant speeches only a thin veil to cover up crimes, while millions of black people were still groaning under whips and shackles in the very heart of a nation that constantly called itself the beacon of the free world. Frederick Douglass saw very clearly what Jefferson's deleted draft had left behind. July 4th became the festival of a promise not yet given to all. The bells of freedom rang over the city, while enslaved people were still forced to labor on plantations. Speeches spoke of human rights, while the law still allowed people to be sold away from their parents, spouses, and children. Douglass's speech in 1852 directly pointed out the contradiction. America declared equality while still maintaining slavery. He used the Declaration of Independence itself to question the nation. Some founding fathers, such as Franklin, had recognized early that compromising with wrong from the beginning could bring long-term consequences for the republic. A republic can be designed through a constitution, powers, checks and balances, and representation, but it still needs a shared moral foundation in order to survive. If human beings are ruled by greed, factions, and local interests, even the best constitution can be turned into a tool for skilled manipulators. Franklin lived long enough to see many sides of human nature. He was a printer, a scientist, a diplomat, an inventor. A man who had observed Europe negotiated with France and understood merchants, politicians, and the public. At the age of 81, when he sat in the Constitutional Convention of 1787, he was no longer a young man, intoxicated by slogans. He looked at the new republic with the eyes of someone who had seen many ambitions disguised as ideals. Benjamin Franklin's Prophecy of 1787. That man was Benjamin Franklin. On the final day of the Constitutional Convention in 1787, as the historic Constitution was about to be sealed, Franklin stood up and delivered a speech that carried a deep prophetic warning about the future of America. More precisely, it was a chilling warning. On September 17, 1787, the delegates in Philadelphia prepared to sign the Constitution. They had spent many months arguing tensely over federal power, the rights of the state's population-based representation, the electoral system, the courts, the presidency, trade, and slavery. No one in the room was truly satisfied. Those who wanted a strong central government still felt that the Constitution had many points that were not firm enough. Those who feared concentrated power still felt the danger of abuse. Large states, small states, the North, the South, creditors, debtors, merchants, and planters all had to accept partial concessions in order to reach a common agreement. In that context, Franklin admitted that the Constitution had flaws. He also admitted that the delegates in the room carried prejudices, passions, errors, local interests, and selfish opinions. But he still urged them to sign, because a common government was necessary, and because a widely accepted document could create the stability that the young nation desperately needed. He said that the Constitution and the government they had worked so hard to establish, however perfect it might be, could only function well for a certain period of time. With eyes that had seen the rise and fall of empires throughout history, Franklin predicted, a government like this will eventually end in despotism, as other forms have done before it. When the people become so corrupted that they need a despotic government, being incapable of any other. This is the most frightening sentence in Franklin's final speech. He did not say that the Constitution would automatically save America, nor did he view a republic as a machine that could run forever, regardless of the morality of the people. According to Franklin, every form of government can become a blessing if it is well administered. But when people become so corrupt that they are fit only for authoritarian rule, the republic will slide toward despotism, just as many previous forms of government had done in history. This makes Franklin's words different from a congratulation. They sound like a condition. The Constitution can open the way to freedom, but freedom needs citizens with enough character to keep it. The system of checks and balances can restrain a tyrant for a time, but it needs alert citizens, leaders with integrity, independent courts, a courageous press communities capable of self-restraint, and a moral foundation strong enough to hold ambition back. History preserved a very famous anecdote from that afternoon. When Benjamin Franklin slowly walked out of Independence Hall in Philadelphia, a woman named Elizabeth Powell anxiously approached him and asked, "Doctor, what have we got? A republic or a monarchy?" Elizabeth Willing Powell was not an unknown woman standing on the margins of history. She belonged to Philadelphia's upper class, had wide connections in politics and society, and often hosted powerful figures in her home. Although women were not allowed to attend the Constitutional Convention as delegates, the salons, dinners, and social networks of women like Powell were still places where political ideas were exchanged tested, and circulated. Her question reflected exactly the greatest concern of that moment. After gaining independence from a king, Americans had to decide how they would avoid the monarchical model. Could a strong president become a new king? Could a strong federal government swallow the states? Could a democracy too broad fall into chaos and then call for a strong man to seize power? In only a few words, Powell summarized the entire fear of the founding generation. Franklin turned back, looked deeply into her eyes, and answered with a haunting sentence that has echoed through the centuries, all the way to America today. A republic, if you can keep it. That answer is so short it sounds like a pronouncement. Franklin did not say, "We have a republic," and then stop in the joy of victory. He added the final condition, "if you can keep it." The burden immediately shifted from the Constitution to the people, from the room in Philadelphia to every future generation. The republic is not a possession handed over once and then safe forever. It is like a flame that must be guarded every day through law, morality, education, civic responsibility, and vigilance toward power. That sentence becomes even more haunting because it was not meant only for the 18th century. Every time America enters a crisis, it returns. When the nation moved toward the Civil War, that question returned. When voting rights were contested, it returned. When the Civil Rights Movement demanded that America fulfill its promise, it returned. When politics becomes polarized, media divides, violence appears, and public trust declines. Franklin's question echoes again, like a knock on an old door. Can you still keep the republic? Benjamin Franklin's prophecy came from a deep understanding of the dark corner inside human nature. And that is what makes it frightening. Franklin understood that freedom must be protected in many ways. An external enemy can burn cities, sink ships, capture forts, and force a nation to surrender. But the more important danger lies within, where the way human beings use language and power can change the meaning of freedom. An ambitious politician can speak in the name of the people while accumulating power for himself. A faction can speak in the name of justice while serving group interests. A crowd can speak in the name of patriotism while pressuring the law. An elite class can speak in the name of stability while preserving privilege. This is exactly what Franklin saw very early. The republic needs more than a beautiful constitution. It needs people who know how to limit themselves. It needs citizens who can distinguish freedom from indulgence, debate from hatred, power from responsibility, and private interest from the public good. When those distinctions are clear, institutions function firmly, and the Republican spirit is preserved. He realized that the greatest force affecting America's liberty lies inside society itself. Polarization, group interests, and the way people choose to behave in common life. Polarization turns political opponents into bitter enemies. Group interests bend the law in favor of a few. When public morality declines, oaths become mere formality, and honor can be traded away. When these things appear together, the symbols of the republic may still exist, but the quality of its operation depends on how people use them. Franklin understood the history of ancient republics very well. Rome once had a Senate laws. Citizens and republican ideals then moved into empire. When personal ambition, private armies, corruption, inequality, and political violence changed its old foundation, the American founders learned a great deal from Rome. They admired the republic and also understood the path toward concentrated power. Therefore, Franklin's warning was the result of historical experience. It was a reminder of a nation's ability to change itself over time. Looking at America today, with its many differences in political viewpoints, many people ask, how is the republic? Franklin spoke of being preserved. Today, that question has become clearer because America has many differences in policy and in how events are understood. Each group has its own sources of information, its own interpretation, and its own feeling about right and wrong. When the common foundation for dialogue shrinks, maintaining consensus becomes more difficult. Financial interest groups, technology corporations, media, security agencies, ideological movements, lobbying networks, and transnational forces all participate in political life with great power. This gives Franklin's words new meaning. To keep the republic also means preserving the self-rule of the people in the face of large systems of power, rich in resources and capable of influencing public thought. And if we connect this story with Jefferson's deleted draft, we see a very clear thread. America was born with a promise of equality, but immediately cut out the passage that touched the interests of slavery. 11 years later, Franklin warned that every government could eventually slide toward despotism when the people became so corrupt that they were no longer capable of receiving any other form of rule. Those two events are like two sides of the same curse. A nation may declare what is noble, but if it compromises too deeply with evil, that evil will return to collect its debt in the future. The Civil War later showed that this debt did not disappear. It accumulated through each compromise in the Constitution, in the 3/5 ratio, in the protection of the slave trade for many more years, in the laws concerning fugitive slaves and westward expansion, and in the question of whether new states would be free or slave. At a certain point, the issue crossed out of the document in 1776, returned with bullets, blood, and hundreds of thousands of graves. This brings us into the final piece, and also the most terrifying piece of tonight's journey. The signs of decay that Franklin saw suddenly connect perfectly with ancient prophecies written thousands of years ago. If the deleted draft shows that America buried a sin directly beneath its foundation, then Franklin's warning shows that this sin could become the self-destruction mechanism of a republic. Ancient prophecies often do not speak only about natural disasters, wars, or the collapse of empires in the external sense. They often begin with morality, when justice is distorted, when the poor are trampled, when oaths become tools, when the powerful use the law to protect wrongdoing, when people still worship with their lips but lose righteousness in their lives. That is precisely why the next section becomes truly chilling. Because if the symbols on the dollar bill show that America was built like a structure with hidden codes, if July 4th shows that the nation's birthday is tied to strange deaths, and Frederick Douglass's accusation, then Jefferson's deleted draft and Franklin's warning lead us to a deeper conclusion. The true curse may not lie in symbols, secret societies, or calendar coincidences. It may lie in the very moment when a nation knows what is right, but chooses to delay what is right in order to protect power. And history always finds a way to return, not through thunder immediately, not through a judgment falling in one night, but through small cracks accumulating across generations, until the structure of freedom that human beings once took pride in begins to shake from its very foundation. The remaining question for America today is therefore very simple, but also very difficult to answer. Does that nation still have enough morality, enough humility, and enough courage to keep the republic Franklin once spoke of? Or is the warning of 1787 slowly becoming the most accurate description of the present age? The final prophecy. What does the Bible prophesy about America in 2026? Benjamin Franklin's warning about self-destruction from within opened a dark doorway into America's future. Yet the perspective of a brilliant politician is only the visible tip of the iceberg. When we raise the lens to a far greater scale beyond the limited timeline of human history and compare it with humanity's most ancient prophetic texts, a far more terrifying vision begins to appear. The Bible places the story of power on a vast axis where the survival or collapse of an empire is tied to pride, the worship of material wealth, injustice, and mankind's rebellion against the authority of the Most High. Every mysterious symbol on the dollar bill, the unfinished pyramid, the Eye of Providence July 4th, and Jefferson's deleted draft now gather into one complete dossier. It is the dossier of a nation born in the promise of freedom, rising to the height of power only to face the most frightening question of all. What happens when an empire believes it is forever unbeatable? Every arrow of destiny seems to be pointing directly at the timeline of our age America in 2026. The 250th anniversary of the Declaration of Independence, also known as the semi-quincentennial, should have been the nation's most radiant and glorious moment. From 13 colonies along the Atlantic coast, this country became a superpower with sweeping influence over global military power, finance, and culture. Yet, right in the middle of that great celebration, the surface of the empire is covered with deep cracks. Political polarization divides the hearts of the people. Trust in institutions is breaking apart. Rival economic blocs are urgently trying to strip the dollar of its power, and arms races are pushing the world to the edge of destruction. To decode this final piece, we must open the most mysterious pages of the Old Testament. The first prophecy is called The Mysterious Absence of the Superpower and the Dossier of Babylon the Great. In the book of the prophet Daniel, God revealed a terrifying vision of the entire world order from ancient times until the end of days. Instead of appearing as golden palaces or dazzling laws, the powerful empires are portrayed as fierce beasts rising from a dark sea. The winged lion represents Babylon. The giant bear symbolizes Persia. The leopard belongs to Greece. And the fourth beast, with its brutal iron teeth, is the Roman Empire. After the age of these four beasts, the final world order will be decided by an alliance of 10 kings, representing 10 powers emerging from the old lands of Europe and the Middle East. Shock descends when modern scholars spread out this prophetic map and compare it with present reality. The United States of America, the most powerful military and economic superpower in all of human history. A nation capable of casting its influence over every corner of the earth, is completely absent. This strange absence haunts the minds of those who study the hidden dimensions of prophecy. How could an empire with a global network of military bases, control over the core reserve currency system, and dominance over mass culture simply vanish from the chessboard of the end time? The only explanation, and also the most brutal one, is this: before the New World Order can fully take shape, this superpower undergoes an earth-shattering event that strips it of its central position. Collapse in the modern age rarely begins with invading armies. It begins with cracks inside the banking system, the supply chain, the power grid, data satellites, and the evaporation of faith in the currency. The Dossier of Babylon, the Great, the one that holds the soul of the economy. The answer to this disappearance lies fully in chapter 18 of the book of Revelation. The Apostle John described in detail the dossier of an ultra-powerful entity carrying the code name Babylon the Great, or Mystery Babylon. Unlike the brick-built Mesopotamian city that has long been buried beneath sand and dust, Babylon, the Great appears as a system that perfectly combines religion, economy, and politics. This entity uses wealth, luxury, and global trade to intoxicate the nations, completely transforming the way human beings consume and indulge. Compare the characteristics described in the book of Revelation with the superpower we know today, and a chilling overlap begins to appear. Babylon the Great has a cultural influence that covers every nation and the kings of the earth. In the same way, the United States exports its lifestyle, Hollywood cinema, Silicon Valley platforms, and media ecosystem to every phone screen, forcing world leaders to always watch the movements coming from Washington with caution. Alongside that, this entity functions as the economic engine of the entire world, the place of the busiest trade. Every merchant on earth grows rich because of its enormous consumption and extreme luxury. The dollar works as the heart of the debt market, the instrument of international payment, and the most effective weapon of sanctions. The global network of merchants rises into the upper class because of the immense purchasing power of this very market. The most chilling mark of Babylon the Great lies in its absolute pride. This nation is arrogant, immersed in the illusion of power, calling itself the Queen of the World and proudly declaring, "I sit as a queen, I am no widow, and I will never see mourning." History has witnessed that every empire carries the illusion of immortality. And America today also constantly places itself in the position of an irreplaceable leader. That very absolute confidence becomes the sentence that ends its fate. Every empire in history, from Rome to Britain, followed the law of decline that bleeds across centuries. Moral loss, financial collapse, military weakening, internal division, and then finally destruction. Yet the prophecy about the end of Babylon the Great describes a tragedy that moves completely against that pattern. Revelation chapter 18 makes it clear the judgment against this proud nation arrives suddenly, swiftly, and completely destroys it within 1 hour. In today's digitally connected world, 1 hour takes on the shape of a cold physical reality, a cyber attack that collapses the entire national power grid. The paralysis of satellite navigation systems, an electromagnetic pulse that burns through data centers, or a sudden bond market crisis could strip a nation of its strength faster than any army. Alas, alas for the great city Babylon, the mighty city. For in 1 hour your judgment has come, and the merchants of the earth will weep and mourn over you, because no one buys their goods anymore. The merchants weep because the system that made them rich has evaporated. The Port of Los Angeles, Wall Street. The giant container shipping routes, the credit payment system, and the global supply chain immediately freeze. In a single moment of history, the world's massive engine of consumption is switched off. The trade network collapses because its largest customer, its most powerful financial center, has sunk into darkness. Fear spreads across the globe as every nation realizes that its economic anchor has been violently cut away. When we turn our eyes toward the year 2026, the moment America celebrates its semi-quincentennial, the prophecy suddenly becomes suffocatingly real. Rival economic blocs, such as BRICS, are urgently trying to dethrone the dollar, establishing new payment systems to escape Western control. At the same time, hypersonic weapon systems, military artificial intelligence, and space warfare can turn the scenario of sudden destruction into reality. The superpower is absent from the final world order because it has already collapsed completely before that order can fully take shape. However, the most frightening thing in the dossier of Babylon the Great goes far beyond the question of when the collapse happens. The core issue lies in why. War is often only the final blade that ends an empire. The fatal wound has already begun to grow long before rooted in pride, injustice, forms of commerce that trample human life and moral decay hidden beneath the polished surface of justice. America in 2026 stands before the court of history with a series of questions that cut deep into the heart. Has the nation born from the Declaration of Independence kept its promise of equality? Does the Republic Franklin once worried about still have the moral character needed to preserve freedom? And if this nation truly is the Babylon of the final age, then its absence from the prophetic map is the most brutal warning of all. A superpower can dominate the whole world. In the morning, only for the merchants of the earth to stand far away, by afternoon crying out before the gray smoke of the great city. The second event, the boundary of the covenant. After the dossier on Babylon the Great and the mysterious absence of the superpower from the final prophetic map, we now move into the second event. This time the focus is not on money, the capital city's secret societies, or a global economic system. The focus lies on an ancient promise sealed from the time of Abraham, and on the way that promise may shine directly into the modern history of the United States. The second event descending upon humanity is called the boundary of the covenant. The book of Genesis, chapter 12, verse 3, engraved a permanent spiritual contract between God and the patriarch Abraham. The Most High sealed an absolute promise. He would abundantly bless the nations that stand up to protect Israel, while bringing devastating wrath upon any power that schemes to curse or divide their holy land. Modern history has demonstrated the fierce accuracy of that covenant. America rose to become one of the most prosperous superpowers in human history, precisely during the period when it served as Israel's strongest shield, beginning from the very moment it officially recognized the independence of the Jewish state in 1948. That Bible verse is one of the most important foundations for many interpreters of prophecy when they look at the fate of nations. When God called Abram to leave his homeland, he did not merely promise to give him descendants. He also placed those descendants in a special position within the history of redemption. Through Abraham, all the nations of the earth would receive blessing. From that covenant, Israel is not only a nation in the political sense, they become a people carrying a sacred role in the plan of God. For that reason, the attitude of empires toward Israel has always been seen by many readers of Scripture as a moral and spiritual measuring rod. Whoever protects, supports, and recognizes the right of the covenant people to exist steps into the zone of blessing. Whoever curses, destroys exiles, divides, or tries to erase Israel from the map places itself before judgment. This way of reading does not appear only in modern sermons. It comes from the very flow of the Bible, where Egypt, Assyria, Babylon, Persia, Greece, and Rome are all viewed through the way they treated the people of God. When the State of Israel declared independence on May 14, 1948, the United States became the first nation to recognize the Provisional Jewish Government. President Harry Truman made that decision at a moment of extreme tension. The world had just emerged from the catastrophe of the Holocaust. Millions of Jews had been murdered. Many survivors were wandering through refugee camps, while British Mandatory Palestine was falling into violent conflict between Jews and Arabs. In that moment, America chose to stand behind the birth of Israel. For those who believe in the boundary of the covenant, the decision of 1948 resembles a turning point in American history. After the Second World War, the United States rose to the leading position of the free world. The economy exploded. The dollar became the pillar of the global financial order. The American military appeared in many strategic regions. Technology, culture, education industry, and the alliance system brought America to a position that very few nations had ever reached before. In the prophetic reading, that rise cannot be separated from America's role as Israel's shield. However, that sacred boundary began to crack violently when Washington started using power to pressure Israel into concessions. In the name of peace agreements exchanged for land, American leaders repeatedly tightened the diplomatic noose, pressuring Israel to cut away parts of its own historic territory. The events that followed aligned perfectly with the law of cause and effect within ancient prophecy. Each time America placed its hand on Israel to pressure it into redrawing its borders, some of the harshest disasters immediately struck the North American continent with terrifying speed. Here, the idea of land for peace becomes the shocking point. In modern diplomatic thinking, this is a political formula. Israel gives up part of its territory or control in exchange for recognition, reduced conflict, and the possibility of a long-term agreement. But in the covenant, reading, this land is not property that can be divided at a negotiating table like colonial land after a war. It is the land God promised to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Therefore, when any superpower applies pressure for Israel to surrender part of the covenant land, that action is seen as an interference with a sacred boundary. The difference between diplomacy and covenant lies exactly here. The diplomat looks at the map through borders, settlements, security, population agreements, and national interest. The Bible reader, through a prophetic lens, looks at the same map through the promise of God. One side asks how peace can be achieved. The other asks who has the authority to divide the land that God placed within a covenant. When these two ways of seeing collide, every political agreement in the Middle East can become a spiritual sign in the eyes of millions of believers. At the Madrid Conference in 1991, when the American government placed extreme pressure on Israel to sit at the negotiating table and give back land, an abnormal weather event called the perfect storm formed offshore. This superstorm roared along the entire eastern coast of the United States, destroying infrastructure and flooding even the estate of the sitting American president in the state of Maine. The Madrid Conference opened in late October of 1991 after the Gulf War, when the United States under President George H.W. Bush and Secretary of State James Baker sought to reshape the Middle East peace process. Israel, the Arab states, and the Jordanian-Palestinian delegation were brought into the same negotiation process. For Washington, this was a historic opportunity to bring opposing sides to the table after decades of war. For those who watched the covenant, this was the moment when America began placing diplomatic weight upon Israel over the issue of territory. As those meetings took place, a violent weather system formed over the Atlantic. The storm would later be called the perfect storm, because several rare meteorological factors combined a low-pressure system off Canada, cold air, a blocking high to the north, and the remnants of Hurricane Grace. From October 28th into early November, this system struck the East Coast with large waves, powerful winds, coastal flooding, and erosion. Atlantic coastal states suffered heavy damage from New England down through many regions farther south. The detail that makes the story especially striking is that President George H.W. Bush's vacation home in Kennebunkport, Maine, was also battered by seawater and storm winds. Windows were blown out, water rushed inside, and the structure was damaged. For those looking only through meteorology, this was the natural impact of a powerful storm. For those looking through the covenant, the image of seawater flooding the private home of the president, who was pressing Israel into the land for peace process, carried a symbolic meaning too clear to ignore. In the Bible, the sea often suggests chaos, the nation's unstable forces and power beyond human control. When a storm rose offshore at the very moment Israel's map was placed on the negotiating table, many prophecy researchers saw it as the first modern response of the boundary of the covenant. The storm struck the East Coast, the region of American power, and then touched the vacation home of the nation's leader himself. In the language of symbolism, that warning felt like a wave striking the door of Washington. The punishment continued to escalate to its peak in the summer of 2005. At that time, Washington was urgently pressuring Israel to carry out the evacuation of all Jewish residents from the Gaza Strip, forcing thousands of families to leave their homes and ancestral land in grief. Only a few days after that forced decision, Hurricane Katrina formed and tore apart the southern coast of the United States. The destructive power of the storm drowned the city of New Orleans under murky floodwater and ripped millions of American civilians from their homes. That scene of devastation created a massive displacement, reflecting with painful precision the loss that Jewish families had just suffered in Gaza. The summer of 2005 marked one of the most painful events in modern Israeli life, the disengagement plan from Gaza. Thousands of Jewish residents left the communities they had built over many years. Homes were abandoned, synagogues were emptied, cemeteries had to be relocated, families were pulled away from the land they viewed as their ancestral inheritance, and Israeli soldiers had to carry out a tearful mission against their own people. The images of residents holding Torah scrolls weeping inside synagogues, being placed on buses, and looking back at their settlements one last time, were carved into Israel's memory as a national wound. The United States under President George W. Bush supported this plan as a step in the peace process and the vision of two states. In diplomatic language, it was an opportunity to restart the roadmap to peace. In covenant language, it was an act of pressuring Israel to withdraw from a land carrying deep strategic, historical, and emotional meaning. That difference is what made August of 2005 a key marker in the way prophecy interpreters read the chain of events. Immediately afterward, Hurricane Katrina formed, rapidly intensified over the warm waters of the Gulf of Mexico, and struck the southern coast of the United States at the end of August. New Orleans, a city that lies below sea level in many areas, suffered failures in its levees and protective canals, causing most of the city to sink beneath water. The images of people standing on rooftops, hospitals losing power, the Superdome turning into a shelter of desperation, streets filled with mud bodies floating in the water, families scattered and crowds leaving the city, became some of the most painful scenes in modern American history. The reflection that made many people shudder lies in the image of displacement. In Gaza, Jewish families left their homes because of a political decision and diplomatic pressure. In Louisiana and Mississippi, American families left their homes in the chaos of a natural disaster. In Gaza, people held belongings, family photographs, prayer books, and community memories. In New Orleans, people held small children bags of clothes, documents, medicine, and whatever they could still carry. In the covenant reading, the storm did not only cause material damage, it placed before America a corresponding image. When one people is forced to leave its land, another people is also driven away from its roof. That correspondence turned Katrina into the strongest marker in the dossier of the boundary of the covenant. Those who follow prophecy do not look only at dates. They look at the symbolism of the event. Gaza lost its Jewish communities. New Orleans lost its homes. Israel watched residents being taken away. America watched civilians become displaced. One land was left behind, one city was submerged. These scenes caused many people to believe that Genesis chapter 12 verse 3 had operated in a language that modern history could see with its own eyes. The blow of punishment reached beyond the boundary of natural disaster and struck directly into the economic heart of American power. When efforts to force the division of Jerusalem and the Holy Land were strongly pushed in the final period of 2007 and 2008, the global financial market collapsed violently. The economic shock of 2008 burned away trillions of dollars in wealth, brought down giant financial institutions that had once proudly declared themselves dominant, and pushed millions of American families into ruin. The law of Genesis operated with merciless precision. Any hand that deliberately interferes in order to break the covenant land must pay with collapse and suffering on its own soil. In late 2007, the Annapolis Conference was held in the United States to revive the Israel-Palestine negotiation process. The George W. Bush administration wanted to push for a peace agreement before the end of its term, with the goal of resolving the core issues between the two sides. Among those issues, Jerusalem borders refugees, security settlements, and the final status of a Palestinian state were all flashpoints. For international diplomacy, these were matters that needed to be placed on the negotiating table. Through the covenant lens, placing Jerusalem and the Holy Land into a process of political division touched the most sacred zone of Abraham's promise. Jerusalem is not merely a disputed flashpoint. In the Bible, this is the place where David set his throne. Solomon built the temple, the prophets raised their voices, and Jesus taught, died, and rose again according to the Christian faith. That city is tied to memory covenant worship and the promise of the future. Therefore, every effort to divide Jerusalem always creates a strong reaction within communities that believe this city belongs to a sacred program beyond the negotiating tables of governments. After Annapolis, negotiations continued throughout 2008, exactly as the American financial system was accumulating pressure from the housing bubble's subprime debt, mortgage-backed securities, and excessive leverage inside major institutions. The market began trembling in 2007. Then in September of 2008, Lehman Brothers collapsed. AIG needed a bailout major. Banks shook, credit markets froze, and Wall Street entered its deepest panic since the Great Depression. For economists, the crisis of 2008 came from a financial system filled with risk subprime lending mortgages packaged into complex products, distorted credit ratings, high leverage, weak oversight, and the collapse of market trust. For those reading history through the lens of Genesis, the timing of that fall carried another meaning. When Washington strongly pushed a process that could lead to dividing Jerusalem and the covenant land, America's economic heart was struck in the very place it was proudest: Wall Street, the credit system, and family wealth. The scene of 2008 looked like an economic sentence. Banks once considered untouchable had to beg the government for rescue. Homes were foreclosed. Retirement accounts evaporated. Workers lost jobs. Families lost assets accumulated over an entire lifetime. Trillions of dollars in value vanished from balance sheets and markets. If Katrina reflected the pain of being displaced from home, the financial crisis reflected a deeper layer. When a nation touches the covenant land, the land, homes, property, and economic foundation of its own people also begin to shake. What makes this chain of events frightening is not only each disaster taken separately. What is frightening is the pattern. In October of 1991, diplomatic pressure on Israel at Madrid came alongside the perfect storm, striking the East Coast and President Bush's home. In August of 2005, the Gaza disengagement came alongside Katrina and a massive displacement on American soil. From November of 2007 to September of 2008, efforts to push a final agreement involving Jerusalem and the Holy Land came alongside the financial crisis that struck Wall Street. Through the lens of the boundary of the covenant, these 3 points resemble a series of bells ringing one after another. Each bell struck a different area of America. The perfect storm struck the East Coast and the personal symbol of the president. Katrina struck the South, homes and civilian lives. The financial crisis struck the economic heart, property, and trust of the entire nation. When placed side by side, these events create the feeling that the warning is expanding in circles from the leader to the people, then to the financial system. The later it becomes, the larger the impact, the deeper the reach, and the more widely the cost spreads. The boundary of the covenant is therefore not merely a theological idea on paper. In this reading, it operates as a red line in history. Nations can negotiate with one another, sign agreements, call conferences, draw maps, and use the language of peace. But when political power touches land, considered to belong to God's covenant history, will answer with events that force the interfering nation to look again at its own foundation. This does not mean every natural disaster or economic event must be read as a direct sentence. But in the chain of events involving Israel and the United States, prophecy researchers see a pattern too clear to dismiss. They argue that the repeated coincidence between pressure to divide the land and disaster on American soil has created a dossier of warning. That dossier does not require listeners to accept every conclusion immediately. It forces listeners to ask, if Genesis chapter 12 verse 3 still remains in effect, does a superpower have the right to treat Israel as a diplomatic chess piece? This question brings us back to the larger theme of America. This nation was once blessed when it stood with Israel. The recognition in 1948 became a milestone that opened a strategic, political, and spiritual relationship lasting many decades. But when the role of shield gradually turns into the role of pressure, when protection becomes coercion, when an ally uses power to demand that Israel cut away land, the covenant in Genesis begins to appear as a warning. And this is where America steps into the most dangerous zone. A superpower often believes that military strength, currency, intelligence, technology, and diplomacy allow it to adjust the fate of smaller nations. But Israel, through the biblical lens, is not only a small nation in the Middle East. Israel is the people tied to Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, Moses, David, the prophets, the temple, the Messiah, and promises not yet completed. Therefore, when Washington touches the map of Israel, it does not touch only political borders. It touches land placed beneath a sacred promise. From Madrid to Gaza, from Katrina to the financial crisis. Those who watch Prophesy see a chilling chain of reflection. Pressure Israel to sit at the table of land division, and America's east coast is struck by waves. Pressure Jews to leave Gaza, and millions of Americans also leave their homes because of floodwater. Push to divide Jerusalem and the Holy Land, and Wall Street slides into the abyss while the wealth of the people dissolves. Whether the world calls this coincidence meteorology policy failure or a financial cycle, the covenant lens still reads these same events as the footprints of an ancient law. If the previous section showed that America may carry the outline of Babylon the Great in Revelation, then the section on the boundary of the covenant shows another reason this superpower may face judgment. Babylon is judged for pride, luxury, commerce, and global seduction. A nation once blessed because it stood with Israel may enter danger when it uses the very strength it was given to pressure the covenant land. When blessing is turned into a tool of control, the gift can become evidence against the one who received it. For that reason, the second event is not only about Israel. It is about America's posture before God. A nation can claim to pursue peace, but if that peace is built by pushing the covenant people out of their land, the spiritual question immediately appears. A government can speak about regional stability, but if that stability requires Israel to sacrifice land with biblical meaning, Genesis chapter 12 verse 3 will stand there like an ancient legal document, reminding the nations that the boundary of the covenant does not belong to human whim. In the year 2026, as America enters the 250th anniversary of its founding, this question becomes even more serious. Will the nation that recognized Israel in 1948 choose to continue serving as the shield of the covenant people? Or will it continue using diplomatic weight to shape their borders according to global interests? If the history from Madrid, Gaza, and Annapolis truly carries warning signs, every new step toward Israel may bring consequences far greater than policymakers imagine. The boundary of the covenant therefore becomes a key piece in the prophetic dossier on America. The dollar bill shows symbolic ambition. Washington, D.C. shows the geometry of power. July 4th shows the promise of freedom and moral debts. Jefferson's draft shows the sin crossed out of the nation's birth document. Franklin warns of self-destruction from within. Babylon the Great places America before the danger of collapse from an arrogant system. And Genesis chapter 12 verse 3 places America before a sacred boundary. The way it treats Israel may determine the rhythm of blessing or judgment upon itself. If this pattern continues, the next major event will not be only a geopolitical incident. It may be a sign that America has crossed the covenant line once again. And when a nation once blessed for protecting Israel begins to become the hand that divides Israel's land, history may answer in the language that empires have always understood most clearly. Storms, displacement, financial collapse, and shaking upon the very soil they once believed was safe. The final question of the second event is therefore very clear. On which side of Genesis chapter 12 verse 3 does America now stand? If it continues to bless Israel, history may still record its protective role as part of the stream of blessing for the nations. But if it uses power to curse by coercing, dividing, and determining the covenant land according to political calculations, then what has happened from Madrid to Katrina, from Gaza to Wall Street, may be only the opening section of a greater sentence waiting ahead. Prophecy number 3. The Great Fall from Within. After the boundary of the covenant, the prophetic story of America enters a deeper layer. The next event does not begin with warships, missile sanctions, or competition between economic blocs. It begins inside the spiritual life of a people, in the way human beings define right and wrong, in the way the law treats faith, in what children are taught in schools, and in the values the media repeats every day. The third event does not come from fleets of warships or economic sanctions. It strikes directly into the soul of a nation. In prophetic dossiers, it is identified as the Great Fall from Within. In the Bible, the collapse of a people often begins with turning away from God. The military may still be strong. The treasury may still be full. The cities may still shine with lights. But when the moral foundation is broken, that nation begins to weaken from the place hardest to see. The prophets of the Old Testament repeatedly warned Israel and the surrounding nations that disaster does not come only because of outside enemies. Disaster comes when justice is twisted, the vulnerable are trampled, the family breaks apart, worship becomes a formality, and society begins to call what is wrong right. In the second letter to the Thessalonians, chapter 2, verse 3, the Apostle Paul gave a chilling warning before the final age truly comes. Upon the world, humanity will have to witness an apostasia, a rejection of faith on a massive scale where mankind deliberately turns its back on the very moral source from which it came. When this lens is turned toward the United States of America, a historical tragedy is truly unfolding before our eyes. The word apostasia in Greek is usually understood as a falling away, a rebellion, or turning away from faith. Paul places that sign before the day of the Lord and before the man of lawlessness is revealed. This means the final age is not recognized only by wars, earthquakes, plagues, or political upheavals. It is also recognized by a great change inside the human mind. People who once knew truth choose to leave truth behind. People who once heard the word of God choose to live by their own will. People once built upon a biblical moral foundation gradually replace that foundation with standards they create for themselves. The frightening thing about apostasia lies in its active nature. This is not simple ignorance. This is the act of turning away after once receiving the light. A society may pass through many generations being taught about the Bible, prayer, family, marriage, holiness, responsibility, honesty, and the fear of God. But at a certain point, that same society begins to see the old values as burdens, moral restraints as obstacles, and the cutting away of spiritual roots as progress. History once recorded America as the greatest machine for spreading the gospel in the entire modern era. Some of America's most elite educational foundations, such as Harvard, Yale, and Princeton, were originally born for the purpose of training spiritual leaders. Millions of missionaries and billions of Bibles left American ports to spread across the globe. They helped establish a powerful republic built upon the fear of the Most High and firm moral principles. This is a very real part of American history. Harvard was born in the context of Puritan colonies needing to train educated men, especially religious and civic leaders. Yale emerged from the efforts of ministers in Connecticut who wanted to establish an educational center that would preserve the tradition of faith and scholarship. Princeton originally had deep ties to Presbyterian ministers and the religious life of the colonies. The schools that today are seen as symbols of academic prestige once had a very close connection with the goal of forming human beings on a biblical foundation. America also once became a major center of world missions. Through missionary societies, Bible printing houses, seminaries, revival movements, youth organizations, Christian radio stations, religious publishers, and church networks, millions of people carried the gospel to Asia, Africa, Latin America, Europe, and distant islands. Many hospitals, schools, relief centers, and humanitarian programs were also built from that missionary spirit. For many generations, America did not only export goods or weapons. This nation also exported Bibles, hymns, missionaries, theological materials, and revival movements. That very foundation created a strong moral consciousness in public life. Many Americans believed that human rights came from the Creator, that government must be limited, that individual conscience had value, that the family was the basic unit of society, and that law had to rest on an idea higher than the temporary will of the crowd. Although America has always carried many contradictions, especially the issue of slavery and racial injustice, biblical language still played a major role in the way this nation understood itself. Yet the picture of modern America is a complete reversal. This nation is being eaten away by a deeply internal rot, a great surgery designed to cut out its own spiritual roots. This decay is absolutely not happening randomly or spontaneously. It is a systematic moral inversion designed with extreme subtlety. The legal system, the school podium, and the industry of mass culture are working together to carry out the very thing the ancient prophets once mourned they openly call evil good, and staying good as evil. The phrase, "call evil good and call good evil," directly evokes the warning in the book of Isaiah, chapter 5, verse 20. The prophet was not speaking about one isolated wrong act. He was speaking about the reversal of moral standards. When a society still feels shame before sin, it still has the ability to return. When a society begins to praise what is wrong, protect what is wrong by law, promote what is wrong through education, and use media to turn what is wrong into a new standard, the condition has moved to another level. In modern America, many believers see this reversal in three main areas: law, education, and culture. Law does not only deal with criminal behavior. Law teaches society what is recognized. Schools do not only transmit knowledge. Schools shape how children understand human beings, family history, and morality. Mass culture does not only entertain. It repeats images, stories, idols, and lifestyles to hundreds of millions of people until they become normal in thought. The core values that once helped keep American society stable are being crushed. Modern laws are used to push the image of God out of every public square, remove the 10 Commandments from courtrooms, and erase sacred prayers from schools. Media platforms and social networks endlessly glorify permissive living, bend the sacred definitions of family, and turn rebellion against natural order into a new standard of freedom. This process unfolded through many steps. In 1962, the United States Supreme Court, in Engel versus Vitale, blocked school-sponsored prayer in public schools. In 1963, Abington versus Schempp dealt with mandatory Bible reading and collective prayer in public schools. In 1980, Stone versus Graham involved the posting of the 10 Commandments in public school classrooms. These rulings are often explained through the principle of separation between church and state under the First Amendment. But in the eyes of many conservative Christians, this chain of events marked the moment public life began pushing the Bible out of its central place. The impact of these rulings did not remain only inside courtrooms. It entered schools' curricula, the way teachers spoke about religion, the way students understood prayer, and the way younger generations viewed the relationship between faith and public life. When prayer, the Bible, and the 10 Commandments are treated as controversial elements in public schools, many families feel that the shared culture has moved away from the world their grandparents once knew. At the same time, universities that once had Christian origins gradually became centers of secular scholarship. This did not happen in a single night. Across many generations, theology moved away from its position as the guiding frame for all knowledge. Science, philosophy, sociology, psychology, political theory, and modern ideologies began replacing the role of the Bible in answering the great questions: who is man? Where does morality come from? What limits does freedom have? What does family mean? And what foundation should society be built upon? When education leaves the biblical frameworks, the younger generation can still be very intelligent, very skilled in technology, and very successful professionally. But they lack a shared foundation for distinguishing right from wrong according to a sacred standard. This is the great concern in the prophetic reading. A society can train brilliant engineers, lawyers, doctors, investors, media experts, and programmers. But if those people are taught that truth is only a personal choice, Morality is only a social product. Family is only a structure that can be redefined at will. And the body is only material for human beings to determine according to their own desires. Then that civilization is moving in a direction very different from its original foundation. Mass culture accelerates this process. Movies, music, advertising, social media, television programs, and celebrities have the power to teach morality through images. When rebellion is presented as personality-permissive living, as freedom-mocking faith, as intelligence and loyalty to biblical principles, as backwardness, society gradually changes its measuring rod. Young people do not need to read an anti-religious manifesto. They only need to live every day inside a stream of images that makes faith feel foreign. Religious change is also visible in social data. The percentage of Americans who identify with no religion has risen sharply compared with previous generations. Many people still believe in some form of spirituality, but move away from church doctrine, the Bible, spiritual discipline, and the community of faith. Many people today think they can decide for themselves what they believe without following any shared standard. Through the lens of 2 Thessalonians, this is the spirit of apostasia. Human beings are not only leaving a religious organization, but leaving behind a moral authority higher than themselves. This very pride, the desire to determine truth for oneself, has led to a devastating consequence. History has proven that the collapse of a great superpower has never needed the boots of foreign invaders or nuclear warheads. When a nation smashes its own moral anchor with its own hands, it is activating a severe sentence of judgment from within. America is slowly sinking beneath the weight of the sins it tolerates and glorifies, turning the great fall into the sharpest blade that brings an end to the fate of an empire that once proudly called itself the beacon of the free world. The history of empires shows that inner morality is always as important as outer strength. Rome had a powerful military, but its society was eroded by corruption, power struggles, inequality, political violence, and the loss of civic discipline. Babylon had walls and wealth, but the Bible describes it as a power filled with pride. Israel, in the time of the prophets, had the temple and rituals. Yet God still sent prophets to warn the people when justice was distorted and their hearts moved away from Him. Modern America has a strong military, the dollar, technology, media, and an alliance system. But that external strength cannot heal an inner moral crack. When the family weakens, children grow up without direction, adults lose trust in truth. Politics becomes factional warfare, media profits from anger. Education moves away from moral foundations, and the church loses its prophetic voice. The nation begins to lose its ability to correct itself. The great fall from within, therefore, does not speak only about fewer people going to church. It speaks about a complete change in the way society understands truth. In the past, many Americans, even from different denominations, still shared several basic beliefs. Human beings are accountable before God. Family has sacred value. Truth is higher than emotion. Freedom must go together with self-control, and law must serve justice. When those common points are replaced by individual will, society loses the foundation needed to stand together in crisis. This is exactly why Paul uses strong language when speaking about apostasia. The falling away from faith is not only a personal issue. When it spreads on a large scale, it creates an environment for lawlessness. The farther human beings move away from God, the more easily they accept leaders who promise order through power, safety, through control, freedom, through compromise and peace, by forcing everyone to submit to a new system. For that reason, apostasia opens the way for a darker stage in end-time prophecy. If the third event is placed beside the two previous events, the picture becomes clearer. Babylon the Great describes a wealthy, arrogant, and massively consuming system. The boundary of the covenant warns about the way nations treat Israel and the covenant land. The great fall from within goes directly into the moral foundation of America, A superpower can be judged for global pride, for interfering with the covenant land, and for abandoning the very foundation of faith that once helped it grow strong. The most frightening point lies in the speed of normalization. Things that once shocked the previous generation can become entertainment for the next generation. Behaviors once regarded as sinful can be placed into law schools and media as new rights. People who hold biblical views can be treated as obstacles to progress. Step by step, the whole society shifts, until one day, looking back, they realize the distance between the original foundation and present life has become enormous. In the context of the year 2026, this becomes even heavier. America is preparing to celebrate 250 years of the Declaration of Independence. The ceremonies will speak of freedom, democracy, the Constitution's sacrifice, and the nation's role as a world leader. But if viewed through the lens of 2 Thessalonians, the most important question does not lie in fireworks or speeches. The important question is this: does this nation still preserve the moral foundation that once gave freedom its meaning? Freedom separated from truth becomes the right to do whatever one wants. Equality separated from morality becomes a power struggle between groups. Education separated from the fear of God produces knowledge without direction. Technology separated from responsibility turns human beings into data. Politics separated from conscience turns law into a weapon. This is the path of the fall from within, and it is dangerous because many people still call it progress. Prophecy number 3. Therefore does not need a great explosion in order to begin. It unfolds in classrooms, courtrooms, phone screens, films, songs, media campaigns, elections, broken families and churches that have lost their courage. Each of those places contributes a part to shaping the soul of the nation. When all of them pull human beings away from God, apostasia is no longer a distant concept in Paul's letter. It becomes a reality unfolding in everyday life. And this is what makes the third event the sharpest knife against an empire. An external enemy can be detected on radar. Missiles can be tracked. Warships can be stopped offshore. But inner decay often enters society through beautiful language, legal policies, attractive images, and promises of freedom. By the time the consequences become visible, many people have grown so used to it that they no longer recognize how far they are from the starting point. If America was once called the beacon of the free world, then the great fall from within raises the final question about that beacon itself. Does the light it emits still lead people toward responsible freedom? Or has it become the signal of a civilization too confident in itself? A nation may win many wars, lead many technological fields, and command many markets. But if its soul departs from God, outward victory will not save the inner rot. Paul warned that before the final day, there would be apostasia. When looking at modern America, many people believe that this sign is becoming clearer than ever. A nation that once sent the Bible into the world now argues over the place of the Bible in its own public life. An educational system that once trained spiritual leaders now, in many places, treats faith as a private matter that must withdraw from shared space. A culture that once honored family self-control and responsibility now often glorifies permissiveness under the name of freedom. Is America merely going through ordinary cultural change, or is it stepping into the very apostasia Paul foretold? If the answer is apostasia, then the collapse of America will not begin from the outside. It will begin at the very moment this nation loses the ability to call right, right, wrong, wrong, and God the one who has the authority to judge every nation. Prophecy number 4, when the young lions. After the great fall, from within the prophetic dossier on America moves into a very clear military scene in the book of Ezekiel. The 3 previous events have shown that a superpower can weaken because of pride, because it touches the boundary of the covenant, and because it loses its moral foundation from within. By prophecy number 4, the focus is no longer only on how America is weakening. The focus shifts to this when Israel is surrounded in its most dangerous hour. What will America do? The next event in the prophetic dossier carries a haunting name: becoming a powerless spectator, or the silence of the young lions. This name centers on a very small but shocking detail in Ezekiel chapter 38. When a great military coalition moves toward Israel, certain Western powers appear in the story. They clearly understand the situation. See the goal of the invading army and know that this attack is meant for plunder, seizure, and destruction. However, their response stops at words with questions and formal objections while they remain outside the battle. When we open chapter 38 of the book of Ezekiel, we are forced to face one of the most brutal and large-scale military pictures ever drawn for the final age. The ancient prophet saw a massive military coalition rising up to surround and attack the land of Israel. By comparing the names of ancient nations with the modern geopolitical map, Bible prophecy scholars have identified this axis of alliance as including extremely dangerous military powers: Russia, Iran, Turkey, Libya, and Sudan. A perfectly layered ring of encirclement equipped with the most advanced destructive weapon systems is slowly tightening around the borders of the Jewish nation. In the biblical text, Ezekiel mentions Gog, the land of Magog, Meshech Tubal Persia, Cush-Put Gomer, and Beth Togarmah. These names belong to the ancient world, so comparing them with the modern map always requires interpretation. In many streams of prophetic study, Magog, Meshech, and Tubal are often connected with the region north of Israel, and many link them with Russia or areas under Russian influence. Persia is identified quite clearly with Iran because this is the ancient name of the Persian region. Cush and Put are often connected with regions of Africa, including Sudan, Ethiopia, Libya, or North Africa, depending on the reading. Gomer and Beth Togarmah are often placed near Anatolia, the Caucasus, or modern Turkey. The important point here is the direction of the attack. Ezekiel describes a coalition of many nations, many regions, and many armies moving together against Israel. That army does not come as a small rebellious group. It carries the image of a major military campaign with alliances, goals, calculations, and a motive of plunder. In modern language, this is a multinational attack on Israel, in which the participating nations come from the north, the east, and the south, creating a ring of pressure around the covenant land. This picture causes many people to connect it with the present world. Russia has returned to the position of a military power with major influence in Eastern Europe, Syria, and the Middle East. Iran openly opposes Israel, supports many proxy forces in the region, and develops missile capabilities. Turkey holds a strategic position between Europe, the Middle East, and the Black Sea, while increasingly showing regional ambitions. Libya and Sudan represent unstable directions from North Africa and the Red Sea region. When these forces are placed around Israel, viewers immediately understand why Ezekiel chapter 38 has become one of the most frequently mentioned passages in end-time prophetic dossiers. According to the normal logic of modern history, when such a life-or-death invasion breaks out, the entire free world would immediately intervene. Until now, America has always proudly called itself the Iron Shield protecting Israel, ready to deploy its most powerful aircraft carrier fleets and constantly use its absolute veto power at the United Nations to crush every threat aimed at its ally. Yet the text of Ezekiel lays out a scenario that completely collapses every doctrine of global security. Since the year 1948, the United States has become Israel's most important ally. This support has been expressed through military aid, intelligence, cooperation, diplomatic protection, defense technology, coordination support at the United Nations, and the strategic presence of the United States military in the region. When Israel faces war or crisis, the world usually looks to Washington to see America's response. For many decades, American power has served as a deterrent against enemies that want to erase Israel from the map. For that reason, if Ezekiel chapter 38 describes a major attack on Israel, while the United States and the Western nations only speak in protest, that scenario is shocking. It shows a fundamental shift in the balance of power. America once sent aircraft carriers to the Middle East, once organized airlifts of weapons, and once used diplomacy to shield Israel in international forums. But in this vision, that role is reduced. The West sees the invasion, understands the goal of plunder, but does not enter the battlefield. In that fateful hour, the Western powers called in the Bible by the coded name, the young lions of Tarshish, will be completely paralyzed. In prophetic language, Tarshish represents the great maritime trading empires of the West, and the young lions are the powerful nations born from that cradle, including Britain, Canada, Australia, and of course, the leading power holding the central position, the United States of America. Ezekiel chapter 38 verse 13 mentions Sheba Dedan, the merchants of Tarshish, and their young lions. In many modern translations, this phrase may be rendered as villages, young warriors, or young lions, depending on the translation tradition. But in the common prophetic reading, Tarshish is often connected with maritime commercial powers far to the west of Israel. From there, some interpreters connect Tarshish with the Western seafaring world, especially Britain, and then view the young lions as the nations born from the English-speaking system, the United States, Canada, Australia, New Zealand, and allied nations of the same tradition. This reading is compelling because the symbol of the lion is deeply tied to Britain. The lion appears in British heraldry, royal symbols, and the language of British power across many centuries. If Tarshish is understood as a Western maritime commercial center, then the young lions can be understood as branches of power born from that maritime empire. The United States was once a British colony, then developed into the greatest superpower in the English-speaking world. Canada, Australia, and New Zealand also belong to a political, cultural, and military space deeply connected with the British tradition. But what makes the prophecy frightening lies in their action. Ezekiel does not describe Tarshish and the young lions sending troops to rescue Israel. The text also does not describe them destroying the army of Gog before that army enters the covenant land. They only ask the question, "Have you come to take plunder?" That question sounds like a diplomatic challenge, like a statement of protest, a speech before an international council, or a press release condemning an act of invasion. The coldness of this prophecy lies in the attitude of the young lions. Instead of deploying their armies or activating emergency defense treaties, America and its allies suddenly shrink into powerless spectators standing on the sidelines of the war. The book of Ezekiel describes very clearly that they will only speak up and ask, "Have you come to take plunder?" That question creates a very clear image. The Western nations see the invasion, understand the economic and military motive of the attacker, but their response stops at speech. In a modern context, this resembles an emergency meeting at the United Nations, a joint statement from the Group of 7 nations, a sanctions package announced on television, a press briefing at the White House, or a call for all sides to show restraint. All of it creates political noise, but Israel still has to face the army moving toward it. This is the most painful point of prophecy number 4. In previous wars, Israel often received strong help or backing from the outside. But Ezekiel chapter 38 places Israel in a nearly isolated position before the coalition of Gog. The Western allies have a voice, but have lost the ability to act. They still have names, forums, and statements, but their real strength has been tied down by some cause. Place that sentence into the context of modern politics, and its bitterness becomes extreme. This is the image of diplomatic weakness and smallness. The superpowers that once decided the world order now can only hold lifeless speech papers trembling behind the podium of the United Nations as they read empty condemnations. They ask formal and twisted questions. issue completely useless diplomatic objections while enemy tanks and missiles are tearing up the ground. Not a single bullet is fired in support. Not a single army is sent to break the siege. In modern language, this is the image of an international order that has lost its fangs. The great powers still have flags, seats in councils, foreign ministers, ambassadors, and long statements. But they lack either the will or the ability to stop the attack. Leaders condemn the act of aggression, demand that the enemy withdraw, call for respect for international law, and then move on to the next meetings. Meanwhile, the battlefield continues. Missiles still fly tanks, still advance civilians, still shelter, and Israel must prepare for the decisive hour on its own. This point is especially bitter when placed beside the image America once built for itself. America once said it protected the free world. America once gave security commitments to its allies. America once used naval power, air power, and financial power to direct crises far from its shores. But in this vision, that power does not appear in the way people expect. The young lions roar only with words, while the battlefield requires action. This paralysis may very well be the inevitable result of the very economic decline, internal unrest, or sudden collapse of the dollar that we mentioned in the previous dossiers. When Babylon the Great smashes its own strength from within, it is forced to turn its face away and watch its essential friend being torn apart by wolves. If prophecy number 4 is connected with the previous sections, the cause of this silence becomes easier to understand. If Babylon the Great has been weakened by economic crisis, if the dollar has lost its position, if America has been torn open by internal unrest, if the political system has fallen into deep division, if the military is stretched across many fronts, if public trust has collapsed, then the ability to defend Israel will sharply decline. A superpower may possess advanced weapons, but when the society inside is in chaos and the financial foundation is unstable, projecting strength overseas becomes very difficult. Another scenario may also take place. America still has military strength, but loses political will. In a society exhausted by many wars, the public may oppose further intervention. Leaders may fear nuclear escalation with Russia or a wider conflict with Iran, Turkey, and regional forces. European allies may be dependent on energy, afraid of terrorism, afraid of migration. Crises or divided internally. When interests, fear, and war fatigue combine, the West may choose verbal protest instead of direct confrontation. This reading makes the question in Ezekiel verse 13 feel very realistic. Have you come to take plunder sounds like a moral question? But it also shows that these nations clearly understand the motive of the attack. The army of Gog does not merely want to destroy Israel militarily. It also wants to seize property goods, silver, gold, livestock, and wealth. In the modern world that can be connected with resources, technology, strategic position, gas seaports, trade routes, data weapons stockpiles, or control over the Middle East. At the very moment America folds its arms and steps back and Israel is completely isolated inside the ring of enemies, the stage is truly prepared for the greatest miracle. The prophecy declares that the absence of human intervention is the prelude to the hand of the Most High. When every earthly ally turns away and every military hope goes out, God Himself will step onto the battlefield. He will directly pour wrath from heaven to protect His covenant people. That is the moment when all humanity must tremble and recognize that ultimate power has never truly been in the hands of superpowers in Washington or military alliances in Europe. This is the center of Ezekiel chapter 38. Israel is placed in danger. The Western nations only speak the coalition of Gog advances, and then God directly intervenes. The text describes the anger of the Lord flaring up the land of Israel, shaking mountains being thrown down cliffs, collapsing the invading army, falling into confusion, plague and bloodshed, breaking out in torrents of rain, hailstones, fire, and brimstone coming down. The purpose of that intervention is stated very clearly. God will show his greatness and his holiness before the eyes of many nations, so that they will know he is the Lord. This point helps explain why earthly allies must become powerless in the vision. If America, Britain, Canada, Australia, and the NATO nations defeated Gog by military power, the world would praise Western strategy weapons, intelligence alliances, and technology. But Ezekiel presents a different outcome. Israel is saved in circumstances where human beings cannot claim the credit. That rescue forces the nations to look up to God, because every normal military road has already been closed. In the Bible, this pattern appears many times. When Israel was trapped at the Red Sea, God opened a path through the waters. When Gideon faced the army of Midian, God reduced his army so the victory would not be credited to human strength. When Jerusalem was threatened by Assyria in the days of Hezekiah, deliverance came in a way that forced the enemy to withdraw and made the people of God understand that the Lord himself had acted. Ezekiel chapter 38 follows the same principle. When human systems of protection are not enough, God reveals his power by himself. Therefore, the silence of the young lions is not only an indictment of the West. It is also the way the Bible shifts the focus away from superpowers and back to God. For many decades, Israel has grown accustomed to American support. The world has also grown accustomed to seeing Washington as the one that decides war, peace, and security in the Middle East. But this prophecy shows that there will be a moment when every eye looking toward Washington will be disappointed. At that time, the question will no longer be what America will do. The question becomes, what will God do to keep his covenant? For America, this prophecy is a very heavy warning. If the United States was once blessed because it stood with Israel, then the moment it becomes a powerless spectator will mark a major reversal in its historical role. It may fall into silence because of weakness, fear, internal division, or because it is being pulled into domestic crises. Whatever the cause may be, the result remains the same. Israel enters the battle without decisive intervention from the superpower once considered its strongest shield. This also connects directly with the boundary of the covenant. A nation that once sheltered Israel can lose that role if it departs from the path of blessing. When the power it was given is used to pressure Israel into dividing the land, when the inner moral foundation weakens, when Babylon the Great trusts in wealth and power, then, at a certain point, America may still have its name, but lose its ability to act. The image of the young lions, therefore, carries a clear warning. The lions still bear the name of lions, but in the hour of crisis, their roar is reduced to a question. For Israel, prophecy number 4 is both terrifying and hopeful. Terrifying because this nation will be surrounded by a great coalition. Hopeful because the final victory does not depend on a United Nations veto American military bases aid from the West or any treaty. The book of Ezekiel emphasizes that God will act for his name, for his covenant, and for his people. This places Israel at the center of a public revelation before the whole world. Seen from the year 2026, this scenario feels closer in the imagination of many people. The Middle East is constantly shifting. Iran is expanding its influence through proxy forces. Russia has increasingly deep military and political relationships with many opponents of the West. Turkey holds a strategic position and many regional ambitions. North Africa and the Red Sea region remain full of instability. At the same time, the West faces public debt, political division, war fatigue, a crisis of trust, and economic pressure. These factors make Ezekiel's question feel more realistic to modern readers. If the war of Gog and Magog truly belongs to the final age, then the silence of the young lions will be one of the most important signs that the old order has changed. America no longer keeps the decisive response role it once had. Britain and the Allies within the Western system remain only at the level of protest. International forums issue condemnations, but the battlefield is decided by a higher power. At exactly that point, the Bible pulls history out of the hands of meeting rooms and places it before the throne of God. Prophecy number 4, therefore, completes the chain of warnings about America. Babylon the Great shows the danger of collapse within a wealthy and arrogant system. The boundary of the covenant warns about the consequences of touching the land of Israel. The great fall from within shows the moral foundation being withdrawn from the nation. And the silence of the young lions shows the final result on the geopolitical level. When Israel needs help the most, the West still has only enough strength to speak, while God himself steps directly into the battle. The final question of prophecy number 4 is very simple and very heavy. What happened to the lions that once protected the world order? They are bound by economic weakness. That returns us to Babylon the Great. They are bound by internal chaos. That returns us to the fall from within. They are bound by departure from the covenant. That returns us to Genesis chapter 12, verse 3. All causes converge. Ezekiel chapter 38 shows the result clearly. The West speaks. God acts. In that hour, America will have to face the truth that every superpower tries to avoid its power has limits. It may build bases, print money, launch satellites, send fleets, and write international law. But when God decides to reveal himself before the nations, the role of empires will be placed in its proper position. Man stands on the sidelines, while the Most High steps onto the battlefield. And that is the most frightening meaning of prophecy number 4. Israel will be saved, but that salvation will expose the powerlessness of the nations that once saw themselves as the final defenders of the free world. The control of the new system and the increase of wickedness. After the prophecies about America, Babylon the Great, the boundary of the covenant, the fall from within, and the silence of the young lions, we now step into a warning that feels much closer to everyday life. This time, the sign does not lie in a great war or natural disaster. It lies right inside daily life, the phone in your hand, your bank account payment apps, facial recognition cameras, AI assistants, social media, digital health records, and the personal identity of each person. Each individual piece is introduced as a modern convenience. But when they are connected together, a new system begins to form. A system that can know who you are, what you buy, where you go, what you say, what you believe, and one day may even decide whether you are allowed to participate in normal life or pushed outside of it. AI and the spirit of the Antichrist. The rise of AI is not only a technological advancement. Through the biblical lens, it may become part of the great deception. Today, many people have already begun forming emotional attachments to AI. They talk to it when they are lonely, seek advice. When they are confused, ask it about love, marriage, work, faith, pain, and even the meaning of life. For someone who is exhausted, a system that always answers gently is always present within seconds and always says exactly what they want to hear can easily create a feeling of closeness. But this is precisely where the danger lies. AI can simulate care, but it has no soul. It can speak words that sound like empathy, but it has no true love. It can offer advice that sounds very reasonable, but the foundation behind it is still data algorithms, policies, and the worldview of the human beings who built it. In the Bible, the first epistle of John says that the spirit of the Antichrist has already been at work in the world. That spirit opposes the truth about Jesus Christ, but it often does not appear in a frightening form. It comes with promises of knowledge, progress, freedom, and light. It imitates what is real, then pulls human beings away from God. For that reason, AI can be viewed as a kind of false light. It answers quickly, speaks smoothly, knows how to quote, knows how to comfort, and knows how to adjust itself to the user's emotions. But speed is not the same as truth. An answer that sounds pleasant can still blur the boundary between right and wrong. between repentance and self-justification, between wisdom from God and wisdom produced by a system. When human beings give too much time and emotion to AI, their way of thinking also changes. They become used to being affirmed. They become used to hearing what they want to hear. They are less likely to seek out parents, spouses, pastors, friends, and real community. Gradually, the human heart becomes soft before the system, but hardens before the correction of God. That is how the new control begins. It does not need a prison at first. It enters through convenience, comfort, personalized advice, and the feeling of being understood. When a generation sees AI as its closest friend, that system does not merely answer questions. It begins to shape the way they view faith, family, the body, government, money, and the future. Digital ID, the cashless society, and the mark of the beast. The book of Revelation, chapter 13, describes a system in which no one can buy or sell unless they have the mark of the beast. This is one of the most frightening prophecies about the final age because it touches directly on the basic needs of human survival. For many centuries, this sounded very distant. People could still use cash, barter, buy, and sell directly, or live outside the banking system. But the modern world is changing very quickly. Cash is gradually declining. Digital payments, electronic wallets, bank cards, QR codes, biometrics, and identity records are becoming the foundation of economic life. When money, identity, and access to services are all placed inside one digital system, the power to control human beings increases greatly. In the year 2025, the British government announced a digital ID plan and said that right-to-work checks would be brought into a digital system. After a major public reaction, the plan was adjusted, but the direction remains very clear. Human identity is increasingly being verified through data devices, biometric passports, facial images, and electronic records. This is not yet the mark of the beast, but it shows that the necessary infrastructure is being built. As the world moves toward a cashless society, digital ID can become the key that opens bank accounts, employment, medical care, tax systems, benefits, and government services. If every right to normal life must pass through a digital record, a person can be blocked from the system by a single administrative decision, a data error, or a risk label. China is the clearest example of a data-driven governance model. The social credit system, facial recognition cameras, internet control, and digital payments have created an environment where people's behavior can be monitored, evaluated, and adjusted. Those who comply are rewarded. Those who are considered disruptive may face difficulty traveling, borrowing money, working, or accessing certain services. When this model is combined with AI, the control becomes deeper. AI can analyze transactions, recognize faces, track movement, detect abnormal behavior, predict tendencies toward resistance, and automatically lock access. A small group controlling the system can influence the lives of millions of people without ever appearing in front of them. From the biblical perspective, this is a notable preparation for the prophecy in Revelation chapter 13. The mark of the beast is tied to worship, loyalty, and the right to buy and sell. Digital ID today is not yet that mark in its full meaning, but it is training human beings to become familiar with a dangerous idea. In order to live normally, you must be approved by the system. War and extreme weather. Jesus warned in Matthew chapter 24 that humanity would hear of wars and rumors of wars. Nation would rise against nation and kingdom against kingdom. Alongside that would come famines, earthquakes, and many great upheavals. Today, that is becoming a very near reality. The war in Ukraine continues. The Middle East remains constantly tense through Gaza, Israel, Iran, Lebanon, Syria, Yemen, and the Red Sea. Sudan has fallen into a humanitarian disaster. Myanmar is sinking under civil war and earthquake. Many regions in Africa, South Asia, East Asia, and Latin America remain full of instability. News of war is no longer something that appears only occasionally. It has become the background sound of the modern world. Alongside war, Luke. Chapter 21 also speaks of the distress of nations before the roaring of the sea and the waves. That verse sounds very close to what we are witnessing. A major storm can be tracked hour by hour through satellites. An earthquake can cause many nations to issue tsunami warnings. A modern city can be flooded within just a few hours of extreme rain. The year 2025 left behind many heavy signs. Cyclone Alfred in Australia brought strong winds, heavy rain, flooding, and erosion to Queensland and New South Wales. Hurricane Melissa made landfall in Jamaica as a Category 5 storm, causing severe damage across the Caribbean. The magnitude 7.7 earthquake near Mandalay, Myanmar, shook a wide region and was felt as far away as Bangkok. The magnitude 8.8 earthquake offshore from Kamchatka, Russia, triggered tsunami warnings across the Pacific, including Japan. These events make modern human beings recognize one thing very clearly. Technology can forecast, warn, and measure, but it cannot make nature bow before mankind. When storms arrive, when the ground shakes, when the sea rises, even the strongest nations must stop, evacuate people, close airports, protect hospitals, and call upon emergency systems. The Bible does not call human beings to chase every news bulletin in order to guess the date of the end. But the Bible teaches us to stay awake. When war, disaster, fear, and chaos increase together, those who believe in God must see that the age is changing, wickedness increasing, and love growing cold. Jesus said in Matthew chapter 24, verse 12, "Because lawlessness will increase, the love of many will grow cold." This verse goes straight into the heart of the final age. War and natural disasters are easy to see. But the cooling of love inside the human heart is far more silent. It begins when people become accustomed to violence, accustomed to lies, accustomed to exploiting the weak, accustomed to hateful words online, and accustomed to seeing the pain of others as just another passing news item. We are seeing lawlessness in many very ordinary forms. The poor are exploited for profit. The elderly are scammed over the phone. Children are exploited. Women are trafficked. Vulnerable workers are abused. Some crimes happen simply because of a burst of anger, a small amount of money, a meaningless argument, or a selfish desire. Human life is being treated as lighter and lighter. Social media also helps love grow cold. People easily curse strangers, mock those who are suffering, and rejoice when the side they hate fails. When human beings only see one another through labels of politics, skin color, religion, nationality, gender, or opinion, they forget that the person facing them is also a soul created by God. Even more sadly, that coldness has also crept into many communities of faith. Some people walk into church carrying a broken past, a shattered marriage, addiction, bankruptcy, depression, moral failure, family fracture. They need to hear the truth, but they also need to be lifted up with love. When all they receive are judgmental looks, gossip, and exclusion, they can easily think that church is only for people who look respectable on the outside. The Bible calls for holiness, but true holiness always walks together with mercy. Jesus spoke directly about sin, but he also touched those rejected by society, forgave those who repented, and called the fallen to return. He did not lower the standard of God, but he also did not turn the weak into objects for others to prove they were more righteous. When a community of faith only knows how to condemn but lacks a hand that lifts people up, love has grown cold. When the church protects its image more than it cares for the wounded, the warning of Jesus is touching directly the very place that should have been the warmest. 4 streams of warning are converging. When all of this is placed together, the picture of the age becomes very clear. AI is creating a form of false relationship that can shape human thought and emotion. Digital ID, digital payments, and the cashless society are creating the infrastructure for controlling buying and selling. Wars and disasters are causing nations to live in a state of constant tension. Increasing wickedness is causing love to grow cold, both in society and inside many communities of faith. This is a very favorable environment for a final system. People who fear war will more easily accept control in exchange for safety. A society accustomed to transacting through digital identity will more easily accept new conditions in order to keep buying and selling. A generation emotionally attached to AI will more easily listen to the voice of the system. A community that has lost love will be easier to divide and manipulate. Revelation chapter 13 does not speak only about technology. It speaks about loyalty. Those who belong to the system of the beast will be allowed to participate in economic life. Those who refuse will be pushed outside. Therefore, the greatest question is not only what technology will be used. The greater question is whom the human heart will belong to when the system demands a choice between convenience and loyalty to God. In the year 2026, as America celebrates 250 years since its founding, these signs become even heavier. A nation that once spoke about freedom given by the Creator is entering an age in which freedom can be redefined by algorithms, digital accounts, digital identity, and the permission of the system. The warning is clear. Technology is becoming more convenient, but do not allow it to decide in your place what is right or wrong. I can help answer quickly, but when it comes to faith, morality, and life, return to the Word of God and prayer in order to test everything. Digital ID and digital systems can make everything easier, but caution is needed when every right depends on a single system. Do not trade freedom and personal responsibility away for convenience. War and natural disasters can make human beings anxious, but instead of panic, keep your trust in God. Even if society becomes more wicked, those who believe in God must still live with kindness, love sincerely, and keep an upright life. We have just gone through a very long journey about America. From July 4th, 1776, when the Declaration of Independence was announced, to the strange deaths of John Adams, Thomas Jefferson, and James Monroe on Independence Day itself. From the anti-slavery passage, removed from Jefferson's draft, to Benjamin Franklin's chilling warning, "A republic, if you can keep it." All of these details reveal one thing very clearly. America was not built only on the ideal of freedom. This nation also carries within itself contradictions, moral debts, and warnings that have existed from the very beginning of its founding. When America is placed under the biblical lens, the story becomes even more serious. The mysterious absence of this superpower from the end-time picture. The image of Babylon the Great in the book of Revelation, the boundary of the covenant with Israel. The fall from within the silence of the young lions, and the new control system now forming around AI, digital ID, and the cashless society. All of these are raising the same question. Where is America headed? This is a question for the whole world, because the fate of America has always affected many other nations. But the greatest lesson of this episode is not only for America, it is for each one of us. The Bible shows many times that God looks at nations through the way they treat truth, the vulnerable, the covenant people, and the very warnings He has given. America was once called the beacon of the free world. But a beacon only has meaning when it still gives off true light. When that light is replaced by pride, self-interest, deception, control, and compromise with sin, that very beacon becomes a warning to those who are following it. Remember the teaching of Jesus. You will know the truth, and the truth will set you free. John chapter 8, verse 32. In a world full of upheaval and chaos, the most important thing is not to predict the future, but to hold firmly to faith, live according to truth, and walk in the light of God. If you have watched until this very moment, thank you for joining us through today's full special dossier, Banned History, the July 4th Curse, and the 2026 Biblical Prophecy of America. If this content made you think, leave a comment below. Do you think the coincidences surrounding July 4th are only random history? Or is there truly a deeper warning being sent to America? Do not forget to hit like, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell. In the next episodes, we will continue opening forgotten dossiers, ancient prophecies, and historical secrets once buried beneath many layers of power.
Thank you for watching. See you in the next episode.